senior college. It's been a long
It
time.
has been, it's a shame, there's no doubt, so we just need to do better than that.
It's going well.
It's going along well, like I say, it's not much fun up there.
Right.
Lake and lakes now.
Yeah.
What they've done too is they've drawn the lake now, take about 10 feet of water out for a year.
Oh.
So that leaves a lot.
So does that affect you with water?
Yeah, hell away, it's like we still use it, but obviously the dock is not, floaters are not.
Yeah. Hmm. Gosh, there were so many people in the park tonight.
Isn't it something?
Oh, it's so nice. I just love it like that.
Everybody?
I'd like to go ahead and call tonight's meeting to order, please. Carol, would you please do the roll call, please?
I'm going to call the applicant real quick while he does the roll.
Sure.
Jim McLean,
Here.
Keith Bailey,
Present.
Paul Muscati,
Here?
Sandra York,
Here.
Carolyn Lomas,
Here.
Cindy Nord.
Here.
Everybody? Great. Kirk, I'm assuming tonight's meeting was posted correctly, the agenda?
Yes, sir, it was.
Can I have a motion for the adoption of the agenda, please?
So move.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Jim, would you lead us in the pledge of, oh, excuse me. Keith, would you lead us in the pledge of allegiance? You've got in your meeting packet minutes from the last meeting. If y'all will take a few minutes to review those. Could I receive a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
For tonight's meeting, we had asked at our last meeting that the town request that we bring in a conservation professional to talk to us a little bit about the church, his ideas, and bring a recommendation to the council that we can work with and that we could at least consider. What I intended to do was to let Jamie Walters present first, or at least go through his presentation first. We have Mr. Mike Biedenball with us tonight. I'd like to ask Mike to go ahead and follow up after Mr. Walters. Present his recommendation at the end of his presentation. And then perhaps we have a bit of question and answer sort of thing. I know there's some questions on some of our members here. And I want to make sure, before we vote on anything, that we at least have a clear understanding of what the issues are. Carol, you say he's about 5 minutes away?
Yes, that's what he said. Said just stuck in traffic.
Well, if we could sit tight for a few minutes, if you don't mind. I prefer that Jamie go first, because Mike hasn't heard that side of the story yet. So if y'all don't mind, if we could sit still.
We can go into executive session for an
Not on the agenda.
hour. Make everybody wait like we normally do, huh?
Yeah.
It'd be appropriate for, put up the website for the history of Blythewood and bring up the church so people can have a visual of the church. Can you bring that up on?
It's in the, you want one of the photos from the packet?
Well, if you go to the website, you know, you can see the inside of the church and as well as the exterior. So is that something that you pulled up, or is it?
In.
Yeah, it's historyofblythewood.com. Section called churches.
Chairman, while we're waiting, may I walk over and speak to Mr. McLean for just a second? Sure.
Correct ordinance. Yeah, he said that he's now saying he believes that the correct ordinance to be considered is 155, 182D. A. explicitly state that. Yes, sir.
Kirk, original photograph back up.
Yes, ma'am.
It's color coded. I can't make out which is the bars. I'll leave it to you. Jim was side door where colored people came in.
The front side doors were.
And it was
And
the
there still
two-
is the front two
Oh,
doors on the right.
in the front,
In front,
on
right.
this front.
Yes.
Oh, okay.
The back
And then
doors.
they have to go upstairs.
There's a spiral stairway upstairs, yeah.
Is that spiral staircase still there?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
It's just beautiful. It's gorgeous, yeah. Yeah.
Down about, yeah, about.
Shortly after, I mean, sometime after.
So this is the interior of the church.
Oh, wow, I've never seen the inside.
See that?
That is so special.
It is special.
Look at the chimney in the back. That's original. All that, the chimney.
Kurt, scroll on through those, and it shows you get to the interior.
Is the inside pretty much the same now?
That's it.
That's it, that's how it looks now. Some of those faces look very familiar.
Billy Rain was right there, but the front pew with the strap like suspenders on it.
Yes.
Billy Rain?
Good evening. Glad you could join us. Jamie, what we talked about before you got here, we reviewed that the board had asked that we bring in a conservation professional. Of course, Mike Beanball came tonight. What we thought we'd do is let you present your thoughts on where we are today and what we need to get done tonight. After you're through, I thought we'd let Mike get up, go through his thoughts. We had asked, as part of this process, that Mike be prepared to make some kind of recommendation to the board. Once Mike gets through, maybe we have some question and answer sort of thing. Just, I want to make sure all the board members understand all the issues clearly. Sure. At some point in this process, we want to go back through the windows and let you, I'm not certain, for one, I'm not going to speak for the board. I'm not exactly certain where we got off on the windows, but I'd like to get that straight tonight as
Right.
well. And I'd like to be able to walk out of here with some sort of resolution to what we got going. So if you don't mind,
Sure.
For everybody's benefit, go back through your.
Thank you. I think I've been before all of you in two different groupings, though. My name is Jamie Walters. I'm the chairman of the Facilities Committee at St. Level Baptist Church. I'm also the attorney for St. Level Baptist Church. I'm here tonight in both those capacities. So, as you all know, St. Level is a historic church. It's over 160 years old. The front sanctuary is dated to that. The rear education part was added in the early 60s. At some point in the 80s, late 80s, very early 90s, the church determined at that point it was not sustainable to continue painting this building. The cost and the regularity of that was just too much for the church. And the members of the church decided at that point that they needed to replace the cover of the wood there with vinyl siding. And that is what's been there for over 30 years, close to 40 years, is vinyl siding. The church, over the years, this vinyl siding has started to deteriorate a little bit, quite a bit actually, and we've had some hailstorm damage, other things that have caused damages to the vinyl siding. Additionally, we've had issues with the windows. If you're sitting there on a rainy Sunday morning, you can sit there and watch the water coming through the windows inside the building. So we've started this process 8-9 years ago, looking at this and going, we've got to fix things. This building needs to be preserved. We need to figure out a way to do it. There's been very little in the way of donations for the church, over those 8 or 9 years to do that. We've had a couple one-time things that we've designated that did not come in for that purpose, but we were able to reallocate them for that. We've had some insurance money we put aside for that. And as we sit here today, we're looking at going and borrowing additional money to get the project done. Because frankly, even though this has been a problem for 8 or 9 years, we still can't afford to fix it. We've still got to borrow money in order to fix the issues. So we came before this board. I guess the process started in 2020, maybe early 2020. There were some applications made, some communication back and forth with Blythewood, BAR anyway, at that point about what we wanted to do with replacing vinyl siding and replacing the windows with new replacement vinyl windows. In that initial application in 2020, there was some miscommunication, and it was conveyed to the board that the windows in the building were original. They are not. The windows that are in the 160-year-old sanctuary were replaced in the 60s with a smaller size window than what was originally in there. So those windows are not original. Over the years, some of those windows represent where doorways used to be. Some areas there is siding behind the vinyl. Some areas there is not siding behind the vinyl. That's kind of where we were. I got involved in 2021 and made another application to the board saying, hey, there was a mistake before. These windows are not original. We're not trying to replace original windows. We're trying to replace unoriginal windows with something now that will help preserve this building for the future for many decades to come. At that time, the church's financial situation was even less. We had less money set aside for this project and less thought that there would be money. We had a couple one-time things that will not be replicated. So at that time, I came before this board, and I presented the idea of replacing the vinyl siding with all new vinyl siding, and also with replacing all the windows in the sanctuary as well as the education building. At that time, what we presented were window samples for interior grid windows. No external grid at all, just the interior grids between the panes of glass. After presenting that to this hearing and to this committee, Mr. Bailey, you made a motion to approve what we had brought forward. Paul Mascotti, moved to second that, and then Jim McLean and John Miles voted in favor as well. It was a unanimous vote of this board that we could replace the vinyl siding with new vinyl siding, and that we could replace the windows with new windows with interior grids. So that's April 19th, 2021. I then reached out to the board, or to Mr. Wilson on April 27th, 2021, at which point it was conveyed to us that we did not even need a permit for the vinyl siding, so we could go forward with that. So 2021 happens. We're trying to get bids, trying to get somebody out here to do this work. We're having problems sourcing materials, windows. If you've done anything in construction the last 2 or 3 years, you know how awful it is. So at some point we come up with, we have a couple of church members who get involved and say, hey, let's see if we can get some grants to help with some of this, because we know we can't afford what we're even trying to do. We applied for a grant with the Richland County Conservation Commission. That was applied for in February of 2022, and then eventually in October 21st, 2022, that grant was approved for us to have $31,000 to help with the cost of windows. Now, what that did was it did not put any new money into the kitty, essentially. The stipulations from Richland County Conservation Committee are that we have to have new replacement wood windows or aluminum-clad wood windows. So the cost of those windows versus what we originally came before the board for, $31,000 won't even make up the difference in the cost of those windows. So we're actually going to have to come out of pocket more money now, but it will be a better finish for the church. It will be a better product. It will look more original, which is what we want to do if we can. So in the process of trying to secure this grant, getting it finalized, communicate with the town, and notified in August of 2022 that the previous certificate of appropriateness had expired because we had not begun the work in that time period. So we submitted a new application then on October the 19th. We came before this board on December 12th, then we came again January 17th. So the issues that we see here is that we're not here asking to destroy a historic building. We're asking to make it look like it's looked the last 40 years. The same materials. We're not trying to change something. We're not trying to tear down wood siding. We're trying to replace vinyl siding with more vinyl siding. So there's some issues with this, and one is under section 155.543, which is the certificate of appropriateness section, section H, which is maintenance, repair, and interior projects, says nothing in this document shall be construed to prevent the ordinary maintenance or repair of any exterior architectural feature or structures designed as historic when that repair does not involve a change in design, material, color, or outer appearance of the structure. That's exactly what we're doing. We're not trying to change anything. We're trying to keep it the same as it is now. The town ordinances, which, by the way, were put in place in 2010, 25 to 30 years after the vinyl siding was put up, say we can do it. The town ordinances in section J of the same section say that there's a substantial hardship that the property is owned by a nonprofit organization and it's not feasible financially or physically to achieve the charitable purposes of the organization while maintaining the property appropriately. It'll be granted as a substantial hardship. And we went through this in January when I was here that, we understand this board's mission is to preserve buildings. That's not our charitable purpose. Our purpose is to be a Christian church, not to preserve a building. We're trying to preserve it because we know that the history of that church, we know the history of the families with that church in this town, and we're doing our best we can to preserve that within our financial limitations. Because the question isn't whether or not we can afford it today. We're actually here today trying to spend more money than potentially the painting option would cost. And the reason we're doing that is because we've done the analysis. We've spent a couple years in the church debating this, that the cost is not an issue today, it's the cost over the next 30 years. We've talked to contractors who've told us we can expect 6 to 8 years and we'll be painting it again. So we extrapolated that out over the course of 30 years, and what we find is if we paint this building, it is going to cost us $341,000 more than if we do vinyl over the course of 30 years. That means we've got to dedicate $340,000 over the next 30 years to keep painting again and again and again. Or the alternative is, if it's painted and 7 years from now, 10 years from now, the members of the church are less tied to the history of that building. And then the result is they don't spend the money at all. And then it does start deteriorating. We're trying to put forth a 30-year solution so we can prevent the problem of it not being taken care of in 7 years, 14 years, 21 years. Again, so as to the window issue, I think it's been brought up before that the windows we requested are not allowed in the town center. They must be SDLs or full divided glass. That's not what the town ordinance says. The town ordinance under 155-182, it actually, that would be appropriate for a commercial building. However, as a church, we're under section D, a civic building type, which does not have those same restrictions in there. We're not required to have SDLs. However, what we do want to do, make sure we're clear on, is we're here to put up SDL windows, aluminum clad, on the front sanctuary. It would be our intention to put SDL windows on the side wings facing the front of Blythewood Road. But as far as the windows in the back of the church and on the side that are on the non-historic section, the 1960s add-on, those we would just hope to put in the interior grid windows. And the reason for that is it's about a $400 to $500 difference per window. So by doing that, you're adding on $20,000 to $25,000 in cost to require those on the back of a building that nobody's ever going to see behind there. There's also a section in the ordinances, 159.34, which is the historic structures variance procedure, that says variances may be issued for the repair or rehab of historic structures upon the determination that the proposed repair or rehabilitation will not preclude the structures continued designation as a historic structure, and the variance is the minimum necessary to preserve the character and design of the structure. Again, we're not changing anything. If it's historic now, it'll be just as historic with new vinyl siding. It'll just look good. And it'll look good for 30 years. If you've driven by there, been by there, it looks horrible, and we know that. And it looked horrible 35 years ago when they put the vinyl on there. They didn't put vinyl up there in the 80s because the building looked good then. They put it up there then because there was a problem. 155.055 is the non-conforming structures of uses section of the ordinances. And it says that a non-conforming structure shall not be rebuilt, altered, or repaired except in conformity with this chapter after sustaining damage or necessitating repair exceeding 50% of the replacement cost of the structure. So under the town's non-conforming uses section of the ordinances, as long as we're not doing more than 50% of the value of that building, we're allowed to make these repairs to the structure. It's in the ordinances. So we're here tonight because this has been a long battle in the church. There's a lot of sore feelings in the church by some of the members. I know that. I know that some of those members have reached out to some of you on this board to discuss that they don't want you to do this. They don't want you to approve it. But the church voted to do this because the church decided we could not afford the other option. And it's not a question of whether we'd all like to see paint or vinyl. Paint would look better potentially in the long run. I would love to see that building historically accurate, look like it did. But there's not an unlimited pot of gold to keep paying for that with. And so we're stuck with how do we preserve this building while also being able to meet the mission of the church and upkeep our other buildings. That we have deferred maintenance in so many areas on our campus so we could dedicate money to this purpose. And we can't start having to save again tomorrow to do it again in 7 years. Because then we can't fix the other problems of the church, the other issues. We can't fix the plumbing in the building. We can't fix the HVAC units in that building. We can't fix the parking lot that's collapsing. We can't fix the front porch of that building that's sinking. We can't fix the foundation whenever it keeps going bad, because it is sinking. So we're sitting here going, let us preserve the building the best we can financially. That's all we're asking to do. I've got the windows here tonight that demonstrate the interior grid as well as demonstrate the STL. If anyone wants to see those again, it's the ones I brought back in December. The vinyl, we've all seen before. We all know what vinyl siding looks like. I had it here before. We all looked at it then. If you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
What I think I'd like to do is bring the windows up, and let's talk a little bit about those and get that cleared up and get that decided on.
He's got beat up with my car. I'm going to get yelled at for that. The guy let me borrow it. All right, so this is obviously a replacement window. This is a new construction window. I brought it in just to show the difference in more of the grid, this external grid, what we intend to put on the side of the sanctuary and on the front of the wings. This is not exactly right because the side windows, I think, are 4/4 configuration of glass, and we intended for that same style back in there, not a 2/2. So we want to keep it looking as historical as we can for that. The side educational wings and the back side of the building, our intention would be to put the interior grid windows on there, that would be on those areas, and not have the external STL divide everything else.
And on that educational wing, that's a vinyl window?
On which,
On the educational wing, the back wing,
now what we intend to do,
what you're intending to do?
vinyl. It'll be vinyl on the entirety of the educational building, but the front facade would be vinyl with STLs, and the rest of it would be vinyl with interior grids.
On the sanctuary? Because I thought you, maybe I misunderstood. Well, the sanctuary, it's not a clad window with STLs, it's a vinyl window with STLs?
On the sanctuary, there's 8 windows each side of the main sanctuary, 4 top, 4 bottom sides. Those will be aluminum clad windows with STLs. That is what's required by the Richland County. The facade, the front facade of the education building would be a vinyl window with STLs. The side of the education building in the back would be a vinyl window with interior grids.
So that's a little bit different, and I'm talking about the education building, the back wing. That's a little bit different from what we initially thought we approved, correct?
So what was approved, I won't say approved,
There was a variance granted, if I'm not
what was said
mistaken.
was gonna be done was there would be SDLs in the entirety of that building. That was gonna be required. And so we're saying that for the sides, education wing in the back, let us do interior grids, not SDLs. And again, we have no problem with SDLs on the sanctuary and the front facing part.
Gotcha. Does that make sense to everybody? Ralph? do you-
Yes, as we were just talking, SDL is the term is simulated divided light, so it looks like a true division on all of the glass. The grills between glass are typically called GBG. So the grill is there, but in the sunlight, you don't see that because of the reflection. You look just like a sheet of glass. So I think what we're looking at here is where the visual impact from the road or as you approach the building, they're recommending that they would use the simulated divided light. A true divided light means that mutton bar that you see there, when you walk inside, you can actually touch it. In this case, the inside of the glass, and from inside, there is no mutton bar. You could wipe the window clean on the inside. So it's convenient for interior cleaning. Exterior still gives you the look of a true divided light, although it's not really divided. The vinyl window versus the aluminum window, did you want to chat about that?
Yes, please.
Is this a sample of the vinyl windows?
This is a aluminum clad window.
Okay. And is that one over there a vinyl?
No, these are both.
Those are both aluminum clad. One of the concerns that you have from time to time, which I think the applicant needs to make clear, is the vinyl clad a textured vinyl or is it a smooth, crisp vinyl? It comes both ways. And one of my other questions concerning this is will the exterior trim pieces that you now see, the large trims around, is that going to be retained?
What is there now is aluminum trim around the windows.
And they're fairly wide.
They are.
Yes. So the question is that, I think for the board to understand, when we look at the window, we're not seeing the trim. So how will they be trimmed out with the vinyl siding and then where the siding comes in towards the window? Could you explain what the trim features would look like?
Sure. My understanding is if we do the vinyl siding replacement, it'll be more of the PVC board type trimming and not as much of the metal, the bended metal, to try to make it look as good as possible.
The size becomes an issue. Because you have, historically, you have wide styles of trims around those windows. So the question that I think the board probably needs to understand is, are we going to get, or is the church going to try to provide that same historical feature around there that's been there for the last 30 years?
Our goal is to make it look the same as it does now. We don't want to put a little thin trim around there. We don't want day trim around it and vinyl the edge. We do not want that.
Y'all
I don't
understand?
think that'd probably be an option anyway. We know that what's in there now are replacing windows, so a little bit of this is when we start pulling things back, what are we going to see
Certainly.
there? And do make final determinations on it.
Kurt, can you show a picture of the building just for a moment?
Back to the,
Exterior, just the exterior.
Up to date or?
Just got photos
Well,
in the
up to date would be
application
good if you got
and in
an
the
up-to-date
packet.
picture. Keep going. Keep going. Okay, so that bottom picture is what I was asking the applicant about. Those wide features around the windows represent more of a historical look than some little narrow style around there that looks more contemporary. So I think you're saying you're gonna do your best to replicate that look.
To a degree, some of that, the way that it's done is not the currently accepted way of doing some of this stuff. That's part of why we have some leaks. But our intention is to keep a wide trim around it that may look slightly different just to make it.
Would wide be 3 to 4 inches?
I would imagine this thing.
Need specified, I don't think you can leave it open.
Yeah.
I think you all need to either match that, you know, from a dimension or set a dimension so that the applicants know what they're trying to, what their,
This
the
picture.
goal is.
Needs to be defined.
Go to the next one. There's one more with a car.
And I'll also tell you, part of this, you pull that down a second, please. I'll show you some notes here. Right here, this is a side door here. Someone had the bright idea years ago to run those supports into the building. That's gonna be removed and put a freestanding post there, because this is leaking water straight down.
You
Oh,
had
yes.
explained that the last time. May I step up here just for a second? Sure. Yeah, this is a window, but while we got
This
pictures,
one's
that they asked this question. Well, I know it's gonna come off. Is the vinyl siding going to be textured? And number 2 is the vinyl siding single lap or double lap?
It'll be double lap.
Okay, you all understand what double lap means? That means that every place that is double lap, you have a seam down 2 pieces of siding, 2 laps, versus a single lap. So just, you all need to understand the terminology of what's being proposed. So, a single lap siding would look more like this, and I'm not saying this is single lap, but it would look like, oh, you just see one piece of siding. A double lap, somewhere in this, you'll see a seam, but not just one, you'll see a seam in both. And is it double lap currently?
It's double lap now, and we actually, after the meeting that we brought before, we actually spoke to the vinyl distributor who said, hey, nobody does a 4-inch, single lap, there's no reason to do that. And if you do it, you're going to at least double your cost to do so, because you're now looking at twice the labor of putting it up, and then the cost will be much higher too. They actually, we talked about an 8-inch, single lap, which would cut down on some of that duplicated cost. The problem with that is, that's not what's behind there now. If we want to keep it looking historic, it needs to be the 4-inch, 4 to 5-inch lap, whatever is there now, and then we can keep it looking as historical as we can. I know the museum, and maybe town hall, I'm not sure, they have the double Dutch lap siding, or the Dutch lap siding, that kind of comes in and it slants in. That is not what's on this building behind this vinyl, it's straight clapboard siding.
There's another picture in the packet that I'd like to see on the screen.
One with the car in it.
It has a car in it. It's 2 on the page. No, that's not it. It's a full side view. That's it. Do you see the windows, how they are, and then there's this piece in between the 2 windows as you come down, that wide piece there?
Yes, ma'am.
Are you going to make it look like that? How are you going, I mean, just a question.
Between the top and bottom windows?
Yes.
So that is currently a bent metal or some type of metal flashing that's in there. It would be something very similar to that, or the PVC board that we talked about putting in there. There is not enough gap to run vinyl through there or even clapboard through there. It wouldn't look right if you did. In order to frame the windows out, it needs to be framed all the way around.
So
intent is to try to maintain that design or something very similar to that. Any other questions on the windows?
And this side too, Mr. Walden, right for that car, there's another one of those canopies that will also be putting a standalone post in the rid of that slight support there.
You do know that those are 8/8 windows, they're not 4/4.
Yeah, that was a question I had too.
I would refer, I may use wrong terminology, it's 4/4 per pane.
Okay.
Okay.
That's why.
Okay, well, so they're actually, within one pane, there's eight pieces in.
Right, yes.
Okay, just make sure we have that on the record. It was an 8/8, not 4.
I guess the question that I have is, as far as the historical features are concerned, how do we make a decision or judgment without seeing the church, without the Bible class? Because there are historical features behind what we're seeing with the vinyl. So how do you replicate that even with vinyl without seeing what's behind it?
And I hear what you're saying. What I'd like to do is, if there aren't any other questions for Mr. Walters, if we could ask Mr. Walters to sit down and allow us to have Mr. Beanball come up and present. Do we have any other questions for Mr. Walters though before?
Yeah, I'm still unclear about when the money came in from Richland. Was it for windows or was it for painting?
The grant is for windows.
Really?
Yes, ma'am.
Wasn't it originally for painting?
There was never a signed grant for painting. There was an offer of a grant that required us to paint and replace the windows for the same amount of money. So the windows have to be replaced because they're leaking inside. So it made no difference in the amount of money coming to the church, but the church was voting against painting. Therefore, by getting them to do the grant just for the windows, we get the benefit of the grant in order to do the windows.
Still don't have an answer in the original request. Was it for painting, which is what I've heard? I don't know.
The original request that was sent was for painting and for windows.
For painting the building?
And replacing the windows.
Okay.
But after communicating with Richland County, they agreed to do just the windows part of that.
I understand that then eventually it was changed, but I just wanted to know what it was in the beginning, and I got it now. Thank you.
Make sure I understand. The original grant was submitted as painting and windows.
The primary focus at that time was for windows, but it also included paint as well. We thought that when it was submitted, it would give us the option to do paint and windows or just paint. There was some miscommunication about whether or not it was going to require us to do everything, paint and windows at the time. And that was not something that the church had voted on at that point to paint. It was a proposal in order to try to get funds out there for that. And we subsequently determined that painting would not work in the long run.
So now the grant is specifically for windows only?
Yes, sir.
Okay,
I think we have a June 1 or June 15 deadline to complete the window project for that.
Any other questions for Mr. Walters?
Hi, do you have to complete the windows by that deadline, or is the grant in place as long as you have started to do it
The project must be complete.
within a year?
Yes, ma'am.
Have
How
you
long do you
received a cost
anticipate?
for actually repairing the windows?
Sorry?
Have you got any kind of bids for repairing the current windows?
We looked at bids for that. The response we got was essentially that would become a 2-year process because each window would take about 6 weeks, somewhere in there, to restore. The costs were similar to what we're looking to do for replacement of the windows, but the idea of having to close off this part of the church for this 6 weeks and then move to this 6 weeks over here we didn't think that was a good option. And it also kind of bothered us that we didn't want to start disturbing a lot of paint in that building on a repetitive basis. We know that there's probably some paint in there that we don't want to mess with. And so we want to try to do all the project at one time. The other issue is obviously with the one-year deadline for Richland County for the grant, we would not be able to complete the window project in that time period. So we would actually have ongoing costs into next year, which of course we could apply for grant funds for then as well. But it doesn't solve the problem of what do we do with the vinyl and our paint debate. In the meantime, it's really a situation where the time to do the siding and the windows is the same time. Because otherwise, you're just driving up cost, renting lifts and everything else to come out here and take windows out, put them back in, put trim back in there, tear it all back off, put up new siding, put all the trim back up, and you're just wasting money at that point.
But the grant was for painting and the restoration of the windows.
No, sir. The grant is for...
The original grant I'm talking about.
There was no original grant. There was an offer of a grant, which the church rejected. We accepted a grant for the windows.
Okay, I think I got it, and then you talk and I'm confused again. I don't get it.
Okay. So the money's the same. They said, we'll give you $31,000 and make you paint and make you replace the windows. We said, hey, the church isn't sure we want to paint. We don't want to go down this route. Can you tell us how much we can use if we just replace the windows, or do we have to do everything? They said, okay, well, we'll rewrite the grant, $31,000 for just the windows.
So it was about painting?
In
the beginning?
In the original application, yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Any other questions? What I'd like to do is ask Mr. Beatonball to come up and talk with us a little bit. Thank you for coming tonight.
Oh, it's a pleasure. Thank you. And thank y'all for submitting your questions and getting the grants. I just have several observations after listening and after visiting the church for the first time today. I've seen it from the road. I've never been up there. What a magnificent structure that y'all have got in your overlay. It's just beautiful. And I will say on some of the comments that I just heard, I've been involved in painting a lot of old historic structures. And it's amazing how much the excuse of saying paint is no good after 6 or 7 years, that is just a little bit of hyperbole, I'm afraid. I mean, I had painted structures 20 years ago, and the paint is perfectly still good. However, I understand the fear of the cost of having to paint when, the old aluminum sided or vinyl siding is a real big temptation. We've worked in historic districts before, and when you have a retired person of 80 years old who has a historic house in a historic district, and she has to choose between painting her 4,000 square foot Victorian house or putting vinyl siding on it, it's difficult to argue against that. It really is, and I understand that. I also understand, because I've taken a lot of vinyl siding off of old buildings, and if anything, it does help protect the wood. I mean, the wood underneath, and the pieces that I saw that have broken, which really is a testimony how bad vinyl siding can deteriorate. It's not permanent. Vinyl siding put on barely 30-something years ago is already looking bad. So it's not a permanent solution either, especially when it's cheaply done. But the wood underneath is just in incredibly good shape. He had mentioned that there was some where the clapboard is gone, and I don't know how that was determined. I didn't see where a lot had been removed. I made a couple points. Let me see on the other, here we go. I'm surprised at the leaking windows because I looked around all and I don't understand why those windows are leaking. The windows, absolutely right, the windows are not original, they're not pegged. However, those folks who redid this church in the 1960s replaced the old windows with windows that look like the old windows. They reflect the original architectural style of the windows, and they are 8/8. There are 8 sashes over 8 sashes, which is very unique. So many times when we have old windows like this, or old-looking windows like this, you know, it's amazing, notwithstanding any person trying to sell these windows, they love saying the old windows are worthless and they must be replaced. I've always looked suspiciously at salesmen talking about what needs to be replaced. The current vinyl siding on the church shows that the vinyl siding salesman in 1980s was very good to convince these folks that on these beautiful columns they put fake clapboard siding down the columns, which is an atrocious aesthetic treatment on that beautiful church. So the other aspect of the windows is the really unique panel that's in between. I don't know what it looks like underneath, but just architecturally looking, that is a really unique Greek revival treatment that if the vinyl does end up going back, it really needs to reflect that. The only other thing about potential these windows going in those windows is right now where you have the side facing and you have sash going right up to it. When those are put in, the window part will be smaller because you have edging, you mount in the vinyl frame inside the window frame, which makes the light just a hair smaller and looking a little different. So I'm astonished in 1960 how well they did on adding that addition and putting the wood clapboard on there to make it look like the old church. That's a testimony to those folks honoring the architecture. The only other part that I'm a little surprised at is the debate that's going on because of getting a grant from Richland County Conservation Commission. I have received 5 grants while I was head of Preservation South Carolina from Richland County Conservation Commission. I received one for the Linder House. I received 3 for the Laurelwood Plantation and the slave dwelling that was on there. And the most recent one that I was involved in was Good Hope Baptist Church. If anybody knows, Preservation South Carolina had started a Sacred Spaces program to where we were focusing on trying to save our sacred spaces where they were losing congregations. And the Baptist Conference in Columbia contacted us. George Bullard contacted us, and they were going to retire the church and asked us if we could be involved to help find a new use for it. It's a terrible plight that's happening all over the state, these churches getting empty. The Baptist Conference, before they donated the church to Preservation South Carolina so we could find a new use for it, the Baptist Conference went to Richland County Conservation Commission, and Richland County Conservation Commission gave them a grant, and they put in all historically accurate windows and painted the whole exterior. So I can understand the congregation of the church being hesitant to want to paint when they get the information, I would say terribly erroneous information, that it would be $300-something thousand to keep it painted over the next 30 years. I'm sorry, that's just really elevated hyperbole. That's just not the case. I can understand why, with that information, they would vote not to. But considering that they're getting a grant, I'm just astonished Richland County Conservation Commission will be paying for this for a historic church that's under the guidelines of Richland County's historic guidelines. I just don't see how that could be going on. And that's the big question I would have. if they're getting a grant for it. And I'm confident Richland County Conservation Commission, at least I was working with them when Nancy Stone Collin was in charge. I haven't worked with them in a while, but I cannot imagine them not supporting the full restoration of this without the congregation having to pay the full amount of that and helping to protect the historic aesthetic of it. That's my thoughts on that. Do y'all have any other questions for me as I kind of wandered and meandered around my thoughts on it?
I have a question, sir.
Yes.
Did you get any, a feel of what the boards would look like? Mr. McLean had mentioned if we took the siding off to see what was underneath and what condition it was in. Did you get a feel for any of that, of how bad it might be, or because they've had a lot of leaks?
I didn't remove anything to see. I did look where some of the holes were. I did see where they took off the gable. But considering how many buildings like this that I took old vinyl siding off before, it's always in good shape. I mean, it's solid. And this is heart pine from 1850s. It's the best wood you could even imagine being on there. So I don't know what they did or what were the problems when they put vinyl siding on. I can't test, I can't say that unless it's all comes off and then you see what it looks like. But that vinyl siding froze whatever was in there underneath. I mean, when you took off the top, you could see the condition why they wanted to put vinyl siding because of all the paint peeling off. It's all there, I would suspect.
What, if you had to say, what would be your recommendation going forward? In your opinion, based on what you saw?
My recommendation going forward would be definitely the removal of the vinyl siding and painting the columns. However, and in looking at it and knowing the fact and having debates with other Board of Architectural Reviews and dealing with vinyl siding, the fact that when the vinyl siding was put on and the Board of Architectural Review was then put in place with the vinyl siding on, it's a difficult argument not to say vinyl siding could potentially go back on the technical aspect of overseeing what is there and what is protected. And a compromise would be to clean up the columns and have those. However, we've got a grant with Richland County Conservation Commission, and I'm having a really hard time understanding how this is happening with a grant from them. I think that's a concern for me, and what's happening with Richland County Conservation Commission that's, again, because of what y'all want to do and overseeing the historic district and what they want to do to have a new church looking good can be accomplished with the grant. So, I'm
assuming there's no way to approach that with Richland County Conservation.
well, the guidelines are there. And I don't know if this what they're doing with the grant is meeting the guidelines or not, because every grant from Richland County Conservation Commission must meet the guidelines they have stipulated on how the money is used. And I've never worked with Richland County Conservation Commission where they would have allowed these type of windows to go into a church or go into any historic structure that they're given a grant for. I just never seen it. And it's paid for by the commission. The other thing I want to note that I saw there is the front windows that's in the recessed front appears to be the original shutters. I looked at them and I could see the green because when you look at the old picture, you see the green, and we all know the old houses had green trim, and they call it erroneously Charleston green, which is absurd. We had green up here too, it's Blythewood green. But they had green shutters, and you could see the white paint peeling into green underneath. And it looks like they've been sealed up, which makes me wonder if the old original windows aren't still behind there, which would be interesting to see. I don't know if they were replaced in the 60s or not. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I know. It's, I've seen them do that on other places, and it just amazes me how good those salesmen were. But they were chamfered. On the old pictures, you could see the columns, and I could tell just a little bit of where the edge corners are chamfered and cut in a little bit. You had made a point when you were talking, and I meant, I forgot my... Yes, 12 over 12. I knew something was wrong with that 8 over 8 when those elongated panels. And did Richland County Commission know that it was originally 12? Oh, sorry. Hush, Siri. I understand, but I would suggest the 8 over 8, something about it looked strange to me. I know, and I thought, well, maybe that's just the way they did it because of the elongated things. 12 over 12 makes so much more sense. So, fact of the matter is, it's 8 over 8 now. And, you know, I used to sit, I sit now currently on the Board of Architectural Review in Abbeville because I own property there. I used to be head of the Planning Commission and the Board of Architectural Review, so I understand a lot of the issues of your jurisdiction and what you can do. I would hope, I wish the congregation would see the value, and I suspect if members would, to see the value of putting 12 over 12 back on there. Even if the board approves or however approves of this, or if Richland County Commission as this, I'd recommend them not be this. How, you have pictures of before the old ones were put in.
Pull that up if you can back with it.
Yeah, let's put up some of those old pictures. Okay, yeah. I have a hard time believing they wouldn't have had the same thing, at least when it was built. Maybe they were changed later, but. Just so you go back to the. Yeah, they are smaller. Yeah, look how long those are there. That's cool. So where it's leaking, how are they leaking? Because they look good and solid. How is it leaking in? Through the vinyl, through the exterior window? And they're coming through the window itself? Water is actually penetrating into the sanctuary? Wow.
You made that point.
That's fascinating. Well, a lot of times, you know, those folks appreciated aesthetics, and you know, I've seen a lot of places where windows were put just because of the effect of how it would look outside, and then they would just put in stuff inside because that's what they were looking for, was that effect. So, that said, that's my biggest overriding concern. Richland County Historic Commission and what's what's being granted, and the ability of the congregation to have this paid for by Richland County Conservation Commission, and the 300-something thousand figure is just wrong. And I think if the congregation knew that, they might have thought a little differently about using the grant to paint it. That's my thoughts on that.
So as we sit now, the grant is just for the windows and not painting.
Oh, and I know you're not. I also know a lot of contractors say really wrong things. I mean, the majority of contractors who aren't used to working on projects like this tend to over-exaggerate. I'm not trying to demean any contractor or anything, but it's been a struggle. I was head of Preservation, South Carolina for 15 years, and the biggest challenge I had was going against contractors that just, here's how we do it and this is how it's done, and having to stop and go, the special aspect of the project, and it never is as bad as what some folks say. It just isn't. And anybody can look at a well-painted house that was painted in historic districts, and they know it lasts longer than 6 or 7 years. It just does. So that said, to me, the best compromise on this, barring the issue of the commission, because this is something y'all as an organization and a commission needs to deal with, is what is Richland County Historic Commission doing, because you're going to have this challenge again. And if there's a slippery slope here happening that's allowing them to do that, y'all need to deal with this. Yeah. Because it's a huge concern to me if this is happening. But being that, you know, from the road, the issue with the siding is not as onerous as making sure that those columns are painted and cleaned and done. And it'd be great if the shutters, if they were painted, to be put back green again, potentially. The green's underneath it, you can see what color it was. So there's my thoughts.
Very helpful.
With the school building in the back, if we separate that from the church, from the sanctuary for a minute, we really didn't spend much time looking at it because it's not historical.
I will tell you, if that building had no siding on it right now, and it went up for the National Register, now that back part will be included in the National Register because it tells the story. I mean, it's an important story on this congregation. How many people put clapboard wooden buildings and windows like that in 1960? They didn't. They did it here because they respected how that building looked. That's the tradition of this church. Our modern times have tended to water that type of sentiment down for expediency and quick, easy fixes. And the economy is geared that way, and it's easier to do that. And I totally understand the sentiment. But it's not in the sense of the big scheme of things. And I think that's I don't have as much faith in vinyl windows as a lot of other people do. Because I had people, I bought my great-grandfather's house in 1999. The people who owned it, which were my cousins, I bought it from, put vinyl windows in it in 1990. And by the time I left the house in 2007, those vinyl windows were failing. The gas inside had stopped. The little handles started breaking. I mean, they're not the cure-all that many people like to say they are. So, you know, internal storm windows and painting the sashes and let them look and see the profiles is usually a whole lot cheaper in the long run for anybody in congregation to deal with, usually. So there's that thought.
Jamie, would you either met or talked, I don't know if it was you yourself or maybe it was someone from your committee, when you met or talked with Richland County Conservation, were they very restrictive with what they were in your conversations? Was there any indication that possibly there would be more available to do more at the church, or did it not? Conversation just didn't get that far.
Oh, no, never.
No,
Oh,
no.
No, but if I called Rich,
Oh. I have another question for you, sir. You're the consultant that we called in to look at this building. So, bottom line, your recommendation would be to not do vinyl and take it off and try to do the painting of the clapboard? Or are you saying, I'm not quite clear on.
Well, I'm dancing around it a little bit because
Yeah.
not only am I coming with my experiences as a preservation consultant, because as a just solely preservation, it would be better for this church to use a grant and get it all painted back the way it was on the historic structure. However, my advice with all my experience of being on boards like this is the overlay was put in place that had vinyl siding on it. I think there's a point, and there's a point where y'all as a board have to look at the politics of what that means to put undue stress potentially where something already was. From the road, nobody can really see the difference in it. And that's the compromise I had in my head when I'm looking at it. And the reason I say it that way is because I've seen too many destructive battles where people held on about vinyl that were unnecessary battles in the big scheme of things. It just is. But the treatments of everything around it needs to reflect exactly what's underneath it if that's done. It has to reflect it good, it has to reflect it perfectly. Especially those panels and everything, if y'all decide to allow that to happen. But of course, the better condition is to utilize a grant and get it painted. So.
I mean, I think we have a treasure here. I know we have a treasure, and I know you know that. And you're responsible now for taking care of it, and it's a big responsibility. Also, I come from the world of philanthropy. I have a family foundation. I do this all day, every day. I know that other people are really concerned, and to your point, they're concerned about all these buildings that aren't being taken care of. And once we lose it, we lose it. That's it. So I know that there's other money out there, and I think we need to make sure that we're taking that into consideration to give you all some help. And I'm convinced, I know, because I see it all the time, they're very, very interested in preservation and restoring what was there. And I just think we have a responsibility to help do this.
The grant that was asked for, if I had been able to have the opportunity to be involved in working with the church when this all started, I don't understand why it wasn't approached for a $50,000 grant to go for the max, to take care of it the way to overlay and put the church back the way it is. That would easily last 25 years.
And it may not be too late.
Yeah. So
Always hope.
that's it. Any other thoughts?
Jamie, based on your numbers that you worked up with your contractors, are you able to share an approximate amount, what your calculations are to pull the siding and paint that whole building? And of course, the windows would be, assume these windows would go in for the time being. Have you run numbers like that? So pulling off all the siding, painting what's left.
It's not.
We're not coming into this blind. It's been 9 years getting here. And I can assure you that, it was probably very little exception. Nobody cared more about this building than the people that sit in it every Sunday morning. And nobody came to this decision lightly. Now, I'll have to go back and look, but I believe that did apply the full 50,000 grant. That's not when we were reporting. I have to check the numbers for sure. But I know we asked more than we got.
And it's 80/20, isn't it? Is it? It's 20, yeah, so 50,000, you would have, it was $60,000 budget.
And to add paint on there doesn't matter because we still got to spend the same money on the windows. And every dime of the grant money is going to go to the windows. So even if it said painting, it's not putting any money in top paint rate. And certainly the paying for it, again, in however many years it needs to come in. We've also been advised that given the unknown, that there will be substantial costs for that. And then we got to work on the inside to fix the leak damage and everything else inside we want to fix. It's just a matter of,
Do you have any images of the leak damage inside? And how? Okay.
I believe it's original plastic walls. It's been leaking for years inside.
On all the windows, or is there just one spot? Or
A few of them on one side.
I mean, I didn't get to go inside or underneath or anything to see.
Jamie, I don't want this to be taken like it's going to sound, but did y'all, I'm assuming y'all exhausted what you could in trying to find some other grants. Is that a safe assumption?
Over the years, many people look at finding grants for the church and were not successful getting them for one reason or another over the years. We've gotten this one, and like I said, we're borrowing a substantial amount of the cost of doing this. And we're going to then spend years paying for it, in order to pay for part of this. Only then to paint. Paint more behind, we got to borrow this money. The only difference is with paint, we got to pay for it over a year and then save for it and do it again, too. And, it's,
Is there any way to phase it? Have y'all explored any possibilities there?
this divide has caused a great deal of division over the time. And we as a body have to have this done. It's got to be done now, over behind us. It is causing, too much strife inside the church that needs to be done over. And what I can tell you is that if you're in the business, is an option, is vinyl better than doing nothing? Do vinyl. Is vinyl better than painting now and not painting once you do again? Because there may be money there today. There most likely will not be money or folks there next time to spend again.
But you know what? That's just not true. It's,
I'm there.
it's not true. that we have in the philanthropic world more and more interest in restoring old buildings. It's just not true. No, I'm not. I do it all day. I can't. No.
You have to ask.
I will say, in all the years of our organization trying to find money to restore buildings, the one big shining light in this whole state is Richland County Conservation Commission. I mean, this county is so lucky to have it, and I know it's been a battle. I mean, I worked with Nancy Stone Collins side by side with her for years. I don't know the current administrators or people that run it, but it's a very unique organization in the state. It's not that easy to get bricks and mortar money for these old buildings. Richland County Conservation Commission is a shining light for it. But when you sit down and say, here it is, and then you say it's a church building, that's a whole nother thing. There is an organization called the National Fund for Sacred Spaces that we use to restore the spire of Trinity Episcopal Church in Abbeville. And we raised, it was a $1.3 million project, and we raised $700-something thousand to do it with a grant, matching grant from Sacred Places. This church would qualify for one of those grants, but what makes those, and you have an active congregation, this church would be something that would fit into that. And the great thing about the National Fund for Sacred Places is they don't only say, here's money, and what they do is they give, you have to raise 150% above the grant, because they help build systems in your organization to do fundraising. And a Richland County Conservation Grant would go into part of that you could fundraise for. So that is one big one that could work. But you're right, we just found it's difficult to find for bricks and mortar stuff like this.
Jamie, I have a question for you. You had mentioned 341,000 over 30 years. So that's about 12,000 every 7 years, roughly, you said? 12,000 per year? To paint. So you would have to repaint every year? We have to set aside the money every year, so it would be there when time. So it would cost 341,000 to paint the church.
There's a direct comparison, I think, in town, if you look at it, in that the Santa Level Church and the Hoffman House, which is currently the town hall, were both being built at the same time. And so the town should have some record as to the frequency of painting for the town hall, and because those buildings were both constructed within a year of each other. And I think it gives you a good example I would imagine that what you see on the town hall is exactly what you're going to see on Sandy Level Church. Those two buildings are basically here, the birth of the town. And
My only thought on contractors giving pricing like that is when you ask a roofer advice on their roof, it's always going to be replace it. And, you know, that's just what contractors tend to do. But what? That's exactly what I was going to say. I don't know about the painters talking about that as much as they're saying how bad their paint job's going to be. You know, and plus, and I know what many painters do when they see that heart pine, they go, oh, well, that heart pine. Oh, well, that means that paint's going to just not even stick. And, you know, here's all that theory that, you know, again, I've done many of these where it lasted well. I mean, Laurelwood, we sold Laurelwood in 2010, and it was painted, and it just sold for $650,000, and doesn't need a paint job at all. Paint job looks beautiful.
When was the town hall last painted?
Find out. I don't know.
2010.
Okay, there you go. 2010.
So, you know, a lot of this is, on the paint stuff is academic and just pushing back on the length and the information that the congregation has. My recommendations, considering all the information, is make sure the architectural elements are presented and clean and painted that make this place unique. Especially those panels in between the windows and things like that. That needs to be shown. And I'll leave it there. What's that? Why is that not historic? What's underneath?
Those windows appear to be taller because the distance between the head and the sill.
No, you're talking about the side.
I'm talking about the side. The distance between the head and the sill of the window above doesn't look quite as.
It's not as much.
As they were redoing the windows, they might have gotten a little bit shorter.
I've just seen, and I don't know, again, I wasn't able to see behind it. Normally, you would expect on a Greek revival, they would have maybe a 1-inch wide board that frames around a flat board. Sometimes they do that. I've seen that cut type of look. You see it on mantles in Greek revival houses. I've seen that relief before. Seeing on there makes me think that could have been, but without seeing it, I don't know. And if you say it's flat, I'll believe you, but that also means it should look what's back there. You know, it should show what's back there. And if it doesn't have that cut, then, you know, if it's covered up with something else, or either don't cover that and just have that part painted and just let it be the way it's supposed to be. And personally, I think that's a decent compromise. But that's my thoughts on that.
Jamie, when you talked with your painting contractors, did they explore any type of, and I don't know that it's out there, but I'd ask Ralph to chip in, maybe he knows. Did they explore any possibilities about any type of lifetime coatings, not necessarily a paint, but a coating? But they were exploring what I'm getting at is some type of coating that would last longer than a really good paint, is what I'm asking. Was it any type of product like that?
Yeah, but that's I mean, that's not, I'm sorry. Good painters who know how to paint historic buildings, that type of stuff never comes up. I mean, it just doesn't. You can clean off the wood, and honestly, power washing isn't necessarily the best. I mean, because once you power wash, you've got to let it dry out well. You got to be careful with water going up into the clapboard and all of that. It's got to be done very carefully, or you're going to get water inside the walls. A house that we, President South Carolina saved in Prosperity, they used a power washer on it, and the heart pine looked so beautiful. People were going, oh, they ought to just put a polyurethane on it and let that heart pine look, because all the stuff came off. Yeah, that's not, there's folks that know how to do that.
So my question is, are there products like that available?
There's some high-performance products now that have probably been on the market the last 5 to 7 years, something such as that. And they boast that you'll never paint again. It's a high-performance flood coat. They prep it, they seal it, and then they end up painting it. And they say, we'll guarantee 20 years, we'll guarantee 30 years. Now, there's several on the market that will do that. I don't have any idea what the cost of those are.
I would
But
expect.
there are some products that are not just the 2 or 3 coat paint that, as you said, at some point, you know you're gonna have to go to another, sand it, do it, and do it again. That's the reason they've come out. One of the products actually came from the company that sprayed the truck beds about 15 years ago. We started seeing a lot of these truck beds that are sprayed. One of the products is made by that company. I can't remember the name of it. But there are several out there on the market now. They're real high performance products. They probably, I would assume they're more expensive than regular paint.
Yeah, I'm familiar with those, and they are a lot more expensive. I mistrust them because it's so hard. It's almost like the comparison of old lime mortar and Portland cement. It encapsulates and totally stops the building from breathing, and they're not. I wouldn't recommend those. Those salesmen, they definitely do it, and I was involved in working with a company thinking it was good back 20 years ago, and I learned very quickly that it was not good. Yeah. And plus, on a building like this, that type of paint, where you have AC inside and the wood and the airflow, and it does tend to start failing just because air's got to go. And it's our biggest problem is people, when they built this church, you know, they slept under 3 quilts during the winter. They didn't, you know, so this old wood needs to breathe. And when you try to seal it up like a Tupperware container, like building codes demand now, that's where we have so much problem. You know, we have tons of problem with mold now. Since building codes enforce, you have to have everything sealed up underneath, which is absurd. But anyway, there's my thoughts.
Any other questions? I don't know how I'm a lot more informed, but it doesn't make the decisions any easier.
No, it doesn't.
Unfortunately.
That's why y'all make the big bucks, I'm afraid.
I don't know about that either. What's the pleasure of the board? What y'all think? I would think, as we did before, I'd like to get something moving. Maybe we talk about that back building, that education. I call it the education building. I don't know what it's called. To get something moving. It's still difficult, and I appreciate you trying to walk a fine line to recommend a system that we could use for the sanctuary. But what do y'all think?
Well, my assessment is that you're going to have to do this in phases, because you say you only have money for the windows, right? Not the vinyl.
I said we're gonna borrow the money because it's going to be a one-phase project. We're not, we don't want to raise the phase, we're borrowing it.
Okay. Just the windows are for the grant.
The front part has to be done, we're gonna lose that
You're close.
weeks roughly from deadline. And I've got, Ray Matthews here, he's a commercial contractor who's inspected the buildings, looked at the wood, has looked at what's behind the siding. He can maybe speak to the windows. We're running up on a deadline of, if we don't order windows in the next 2 to 3 weeks, that Richmond County money's gone. Because we won't be able to get the project done.
What's the, just out of curiosity, what's the lifetime of the wood? I mean, is it a,
Excuse me, may I please look at the window for the board? This has a projected style. So both of these have got, when we're talking about SDL, it has a very definite projected style. Notice it's not flat against the left. This is the same. And one of this is aluminum, this is not.
Those are both aluminum.
Just so that you can see the difference in terms of that, if that exterior is that appropriate look for a more historical window. Does the vinyl, maybe ask, your name is? Ray. Ray, on the vinyl, or the vinyl windows, what makes the decision for you all for the church, whether it's aluminum or vinyl? Have you chosen the vinyl because of cost?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so on the vinyl, is the vinyl smooth or is the vinyl a textured vinyl?
And what is there now? The bottom window, pane, sash is some kind of nasty privacy glass that's in there now. So you can't even see through that at all. It does not look good up there now. It's that type of glass. And so, this would at least also make it easier to see as well, which is something we also considered in this project. We thought about, do we want to do some kind of privacy glass or not? And considered that from a safety perspective for the church, we want to be able to see someone outside before they get to the inside if that ever were to become an issue. So we definitely did not want to go back to the privacy glass that's there now.
So in years gone by, the textured glass was a desire for congregation so that we were not looking out the windows, we were looking at the pulpit. That's exactly why it was done in churches. That's actually, it was primarily put in decades ago so that people would keep their eyes forward and not be looking at the birds outside or the people walking around outside. But that's actually what the old textured glass in those windows was for. That's not necessarily a historical element. It was actually a functional thing that they did back then. We don't do that hardly.
Jim, you got any thoughts?
No, I
That
guess
you
I go
wanna
back to what I
express.
said earlier. I don't know how we can make a decision when we can't see what we're doing now, basically.
These are the correct windows. These are the ones you're talking about vinyl.
Well, you're talking about the trim, or you're talking, going back to what Ralph was saying, but with appropriate trim around the windows and things of that nature too. So it's all, to me, it's all bundled together. And if it's, if it's damaged, underneath the siding, the church has got to be repaired anyway. You're not gonna put vinyl back on top of damaged wood to start with. So I don't see why there's much risk with the church. If you take the vinyl off and there's damage there, what are you gonna do? You got to replace the damage. And I think a lot of probably historical features of the church that would become more apparent with vinyl off.
brings up a question, Jamie. If you take the vinyl off, and you said that some of the wood is damaged,
Yes, ma'am.
you would have to repair that wood.
We'd have to make
Or you wouldn't
repairs.
just slap on new vinyl on top of rotting wood.
We would repair what needs, but has to be repaired, but it is different. We would not be trying to get boards milled to match the original profile for something we were going to cover up. We would cover it up in a way that we could go forward with the vinyl at that point.
Ralph, is there anything unique about the profile of the wood, based on what you've seen? Is there anything unique about the current profile of the wood? Yes.
All I've been able to see is what's on gable end, and it's fairly straightforward,
Standard?
standard clapboard siding from years gone by.
Jamie, you mentioned, I think, don't let me put words in your mouth, that most of that damage was down low.
Sorry?
And I understand that most of the damage that you do know you have is down low.
We haven't pulled back anything high, but we know that what's down low that we have pulled back is damaged and rotten.
You have reason to believe you do have damage up high?
Looking at the front gable end, you can see that there's some splitting of the boards and some that looks bad, but I won't say that it's as bad as the bottom. I don't believe that it is. I believe that it's probably worse towards the bottom parts. And then, like I said, if you look at this picture here on the screen, you'll notice that the back side there, you'll see that that top window is actually longer than the ones 1, 2, and 3. Number 4 is longer. You'll see that on the bottom, number 4 is actually a door and not a window. So at some point over time, those doors were actually converted into windows, and that top window was changed size to match the other 3 windows. And so that's where we get into some of the areas where there isn't clapboard siding at all. There's just flat wood behind the vinyl in those areas.
I will say, what you're talking about with the worn out stuff, with that shrubbery on there, the clapboard at the bottom would have gotten a lot more weathering because of the water hitting the shrubbery and splashing up on the clapboard, so it makes sense it got more water directly into it that would have worn it down a little more.
During your process, was there any thought to siding on the back building, paint on the front building, or just the same thing?
We threw it out there, but I mean, you all agreed last month we were here. It's not going to look right to have 2 different types of siding on the same.
It wouldn't be my preference.
It needs to be uniform.
I don't think anybody on the board, if the siding was taken off of it and it exposed element that didn't make sense for it to be repaired or painted, that I think the board would probably strongly consider an alternative, back with the vinyl. But I don't know how you make that decision when you don't know what's behind it.
We don't have the information we need, and we have facts that maybe aren't quite right. We don't know what Richmond really is doing.
I can show you the grant if you want to see it.
What?
I can show you the grant that says it's for the windows.
No, I'm not talking about that.
Okay.
I just don't think we have enough information.
I guess the question is, how do we deal with the timing of the windows?
Right.
Basically.
But we don't know for sure they wouldn't extend it. We do that all the time.
Considering there seems to be an issue of the onerous cost of the loan that your congregation is having to do. And if this rents for the windows, has it been put forth to the congregation that, so the one thing about the vinyl, although I know y'all taking a lot of the vinyl off, but it's not gonna hurt to be on there another year before to apply for a grant for the other one. It's not gonna hurt the clapboard underneath or sit there another year.
But if we did that, now we're going to lose the $30,000 we have for windows now.
Yeah, but you got it to do the windows, so you can still do it for the windows.
But we'd have have to, then we would not be able to trim the windows out. Or we're gonna tear it all right back off, and the vinyl comes off in the road. And so we're gonna waste money fixing something only to tear it back off. And as far as applying for a grant again, we'd be limited because we got this one this year.
You know, people give grants like that, but they know that you're gonna run into trouble, and we deal with this all the time. So you think you're asking for one thing, and then you get into it and you see something totally different. And then we have to say, okay, we can work with you. It's not black and white.
But it says specifically on the agreement, no extensions beyond June 30th will be granted.
I don't care what it says on the agreement. I know that you have to work with people, and I'm not saying promise you it's gonna happen. I don't know, but I know that people that give money, that's exactly what happens, this kind of thing.
If I can make a comment on that. So, Richland County Conservation Commission limits $50,000 max grant within a 2-year period. So you requested this grant when? Summer?
Fiscal year '23.
Fiscal year, but the request was in 2022, or disbursement in 2022.
Yes.
So that means you could approach them in 2024, which is a year and a half.
Right.
For another $50,000 grant.
You could check, we could check with them.
Please don't.
No,
Please
I'm not
don't
saying I
undermine
wouldn't do
this.
it, but I don't think you understand, sir, what grantees do, what foundations and that kind, they do. They have to work with this kind of thing all the
Also,
time.
This is a county, and it goes off the fiscal budget for the year for the county, and it has to be spent in that fiscal year,
I
as
get
it's been
it.
explained to us.
But you know what? We come up with that every day, and you find a way around it. It may not work, but it's worth a try.
I'll say, Richland County Conservation Commission is pretty rigid.
I'm sure they are, but they're all rigid, but
Well, I know, but I would just suggest that the terms of the grant, they can't necessarily just say, oh, well, we can work around that necessarily. All I'm saying is that if the focus is on the ultimate restoration of the church, this could be done if the congregation has all the right information and looking at the time and looking at this. I don't see why y'all can't plan a grant to do the other, use this money for doing the windows and use the other in a year and a half. I mean, again, I haven't worked with these folks. I got 5 grants from them, and it was so easy just to go back and they'd say, okay, good, and come back and do this.
And that's,
They'll give you what you need over 2 years.
and maybe that's what you say when you say phase 1 are the windows, phase 2 will be the siding or the painting, or.
Wouldn't the congregation like not being in debt? I mean, I don't.
This is tearing apart the congregation, delaying it. And delaying it every day is making it worse and worse and worse between the members of the church. There is so much acrimony right now over this project that there are people who are saying, don't do anything now. You know, and that's not what we want to do. We want to preserve it. You know, and the issue isn't can we get a grant next year to do something. It's how do we pay for it the next time.
And I totally understand about acrimony in the church, and I understand that. But I personally, working with churches with sacred spaces, and working with a lot of churches on it, and the acrimony is usually, I'm predicting this, is those that would like to do something with the church and not mess, maybe paint it, maybe not, I don't know what the case has been, but,
Over 90% voted not to paint.
well, if I was in that congregation and I didn't know anything about painting and someone told me it'd be $500,000 in 30 years, I would have voted against it too. That's bad information.
they don't have the right information.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sorry, that's just terrible information.
Well, to move forward, I need some kind of motion to be made, and I don't see one coming anytime, right at the moment. It sounds like,
Can we settle on the windows?
Yeah, that's what we need to do.
I wouldn't mind trying to settle the windows, sure enough, all the way around, both buildings.
Or at least on, or certainly at least on, I guess what you call, both sides of the old sanctuary and the front of the Sunday school rooms. So to give the parents of everything being seen.
By doing that, would we compromise what we want to do eventually? By doing that, if we say, well, to go with the windows, would we compromise ourselves for what we want them to do later?
I can't speak to however that y'all make that decision.
No, I'm just wanting your opinion on would it compromise what else we want?
What's being torn here is the rushed aspect of this and the congregation making decisions outside. Now, there was mention of what was originally approved. I have no idea what that means. And that's a whole other issue y'all have to balance. My personal feeling on the historicity of the place, you know, I don't have a problem saying it's good compromise with the vinyl siding where it's just clapboard and paint the historical features that make it unique looking and have that as a compromise on the exterior stuff. On the windows, I don't understand the issues of what's going on with the water leaking because when I walked around there, I don't understand what's wrong with that. Considering they're totally sealed up. I don't know what's happening.
How do you determine it? How do you determine what's going on?
Go there and take apart around outside and see where the leak's coming from. I suggest it's a failure of that vinyl siding, and where all that stuff is, the water's getting behind it somehow. That's probably what's happening, which is what happens when you put vinyl siding on this stuff. You know, you don't see what's happening behind it. And all it takes is a couple upstairs windows to have some caulking fail, and over 5 years, all of a sudden water starts to come in, and then you have water leakage. It's probably the vinyl that caused that.
And I won't dispute that the vinyl was not, best practices were not used in putting that vinyl on. And that's part of what has to be corrected.
But but that might not be the failure of the window, it could be the failure of the vinyl. Which, and those windows look like when they were put in the 60s, they've been covered up with those, but those store windows all that time. So I didn't see any weathering or deterioration of the old windows or the 60s windows in here. Whenever I see that, my recommendation, whenever I'm hired by, we're looking at churches, is always, it's so much cheaper just to paint it, put them in internal doors. It's just so much cheaper. But this is also about how all this was presented to the group and what decisions they made, not having a historic consultant or someone working in there with them who are making these decisions.
So your suggestion would be to move forward with the windows on both buildings?
If we can determine that they're historically correct as far as the church is concerned, in terms of appearance at least, including the trim.
The new windows,
Yes.
what we're looking at here.
I'm kind of deferring to Ralph, who's the consultant, give us some guidance there as well as far as,
Well, if,
we aren't window experts here.
if this window, from a aesthetic standpoint, in accordance to this window with simulated divided lights meets the intent of the ordinance. Hopefully, I think we're very good. If you wanted to do only the windows, they would have to pull up all the trim that is around the windows, set these, pull the windows out, set these windows in, and the vinyl, you will have a gated whole
Can you,
as far
can,
as being practical.
can you set the windows and leave the vinyl off at that point? Until
If
we
you
can make a
set the
determination?
windows, so if you take all the trims off, the siding is now stopped here with a piece of tape over. And if you don't go back here, you open water intrusion in the backside of the siding.
But what I'm asking though, if you take the siding off, off to start with, then set the windows.
Well, I mean, if you remove the siding and you've got raw wood up there, it would be fairly an easy process.
But then we can make a decision whether or not it's appropriate to paint the church or put vinyl siding back on.
Normally, when we dealt with windows like this, the sashes are taken out, and the frame, the historical frame, you take out the little stops, but the frame is there, and then these are just set right in the frame.
No, that's not what they're talking about doing, I don't believe. You're talking about removing the entire window and frame.
Black one.
Inside the frame, the historic frame, like I said.
Oh, I see.
So what I'm asking is, do these come off and this just sets inside the historic frame?
That's a,
This one. This is for new construction.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
but the windows that you would use would look like this one
Yes,
with the 4 lights or 8
8 over
lights,
8.
what do you call it?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. Would look like this, but install it like the one on my left.
Yes, ma'am. And we know that they're already replacing windows there, so we would look at if it was feasible when we get there to actually remove the old, now, Ray, I may be speaking out of turn here for what is possible, remove the old replacement window completely and put one back into the original size, so we can kind of keep some of the size, but I don't know if that's possible yet or not. And
Yeah, so the windows that are there, did they put in full frame replacement? They just took out the old sashes and put in those as sashes and kept the frame opening the same?
they've been shrunk down.
They have been shrunk
Yes.
down.
So a replacement window
Would be,
sits within the original outside frame, so the window is slightly smaller.
Right.
And if you pull all that out, your new windows would go right back in that same place.
That's our plan,
and
yes, sir.
and that's what I was saying, the new ones would be smaller. I didn't realize those were also like that, so.
So that wide trim down the jambs and the header and the sill is probably concealing that original window frame.
Right.
It's just covering it up just to.
Yes, sir. Yeah, I think it's wide. It's more than an inch or two, but I don't think it's as much as what's there now. This picture here, it doesn't appear to be as wide as what is there now. But again, who knows what the guy bending metal did 35 years ago and why he did it that size.
Ralph, let me ask you again, if you pull the siding off the church completely, then that exposes everything. If you go back in, then put new windows in, as we talked about, retrim them out, you can always come back in and paint the church, or you can come back in at that point, put vinyl siding back on. Is that correct? Or is that correct?
I would say generally that would be correct. It could be done so that it would receive the siding back in place at a later date. The size of the trim, if you notice, the trim that is now on the windows, the depth of it comes out to the outside of the siding. As long as these windows had a similar type of trim, so that the trim isn't back beyond the outside face of the siding. That would have to be.
But you put new trim on, so you can end up, you can work with what's there.
You could do that. Could
the windows be made weather tight while the issue of the siding gets set.
Yeah, I think if they're set in existing frame, if they're replacement windows, it's a matter of getting back in there, sealing the opening, and they're sealed. Because what's watertight right now, what should be watertight right now, is what's there originally, that existing outside frame. It's still there, it's never been moved.
Do we know that?
That's what they just said, is the windows, the replacement windows left the original outside frame that had the sashes in it. They pulled the sashes out, set the windows in there. So they did not,
As far as we
you
can
can
tell,
tell.
I think Bobby Lohner was probably the only one who actually knew that. And unfortunately, he can't tell us today. He was probably the only one there in the 60s maybe that would have recalled that anyway.
That being the case, then they probably did not even take the trim off of the old siding.
They probably didn't.
They just pulled the sashes out, went right back in there, and then covered it all up the side.
Let's walk back through it. If we say pull the siding off, all the vinyl siding off, replace the windows back with what we're talking about tonight as far as 8 over 8, retrim the windows, and at that point, we can defer decision on whether we paint or allow vinyl siding to go back on the church based on what the exposure is on the siding itself.
I think that's a fair statement. Generally, there may be some small nuances that would have to be worked out, but generally, I think that would be possible.
And that would be,
And just to understand, you're saying remove all the vinyl, do all this, and then decide whether to put vinyl or not back on.
Replace the windows, and that you've got, I guess you have to replace the windows based on your grant.
And the
And
issue,
then we'll defer the decision on whether or not the church should be painted or if the vinyl can go back on it based on the condition of the church.
so there's two issues with that. I think one, how you would trim the windows would differ depending on whether it's going to be paint or vinyl. So, you know, if we trim it back out, now probably either way it may work. You got to tear all that back off and just paint it.
Well, I think that you actually trim them out to receive the vinyl. And then if you don't put vinyl on,
And
trim
it's
it
just
just
the
a
wood.
little bit deeper than it would be had you just left the paint.
And then we also have the issue of we've now grown the cost exponentially by having to rent all the equipment again. We're going to do all the work. We already got it here now in order to wait for this decision, as well as scheduling contractors back out there. So in the meantime, it looks like whatever, you know, and I think I've been pretty consistent on this since I first came in here in December. The church has zero interest whatsoever in removing that vinyl siding unless there is a approval by this board to replace the vinyl siding. If we remove it, and you guys say, you can't put it back, now you got to paint it, we no longer have a choice. Right now, we can choose to fix what is there. It won't look as good as what it would if it was all replaced and new, but we can fix the broken pieces and move on down the road. We don't want to do that, but we're not going to remove it without an approval that we can replace it.
so if the windows were approved, would you then install the windows with the siding left in place? And trimmed out and the siding left in place?
If it's possible to do that, that would be the option we'd go with. And we would not remove the vinyl. Though I don't, without speaking to the contractors a little more, the feasibility and the cost analysis of that, I'm not sure. You know, and frankly, we filed this application on October 19th. That's 119 days ago. We were before this committee on December 12th. That was 65 days ago. The town ordinances, section 155, 543, certificate of appropriateness, sets time limits for this board to rule. And if this board does not issue a ruling approving or denying our application within 45 days, it is deemed approved. And we've come back here without making this argument to give the board an opportunity to approve it, you know, based on us trying to act in good faith. But the town ordinances say This was approved 2.5 months ago by the board failing to act.
I think the board did act, it just didn't approve it. But you came before the board, and the board did hear your request.
No, sir, the ordinances say the board must take action, which is to approve, deny, or approve with modifications, and this board has issued no certificate of appropriateness whatsoever or denied any certificate.
And I think that just is indicative of just how we're trying to fulfill our responsibilities relative to a historic building.
Sure.
And of course, you're trying to work within the parameters you've got to work with money in your congregation. And it just bears out how difficult a decision this is. We want to be as understanding as we can. We're not trying to hammer anybody. Like I said, we're trying to do our job, and you're trying to do your job. And the two are meeting and going around.
Sure.
Now, if we could come to some agreement on these windows tonight, we can at least get the windows moving forward. And unfortunately, I think we'll be continuing down this road trying to figure this out. But it will at least take advantage of the grant. And maybe there's more work to do. And I'm not trying to be offensive when I say it. Maybe there's more work to do in trying to pursue some other grants, some other grant money, which I'm sure anybody would welcome. I would think.
And
I don't know what's out there. I'm not.
And I understand your position. And I hope you understand mine. And what I'm saying of the town ordinances say it's already approved.
I understand what you're saying.
So, at this point, I can go get a permit and put vinyl siding in those windows with the grids between glass on the entire education building and the SDLs on the front sanctuary, because that was what was submitted in the application. That's what was brought in here in December. Okay, so under the terms of the ordinance, we can act without the board's approval at this point, because the ordinances say if the board failed to act within 45 days, it's granted.
And assuming that's in there, let's take it at face value. Assuming that's in there, I would hope you wouldn't do that. I would hope you would allow us to continue to work through the problem, starting tonight with getting the windows approved, and then continue to try to figure this siding out. And maybe somehow both of us win. But I understand the money side, and that I would assume that covers everything. If the money's not there, you can't do anything. But that's something I think that needs to be focused on a little bit more. And I say that from a grant perspective, not more donations from your congregation, but trying to find more money.
And I hope that you recognize that I didn't make this argument last month when I could have. I didn't make this argument in December when I could have, that the ordinance has already said it was approved. I kept coming back in good faith, trying to reach some kind of resolution and explain to the board the church's position financially, emotionally tied to this building. But I'm sitting here tonight, I'm hearing the exact same opposition and arguments and questions that I was asked in December of, well, you just tear it off and let us come look at it. We told you we weren't doing that in December. We're still not going to do it. And now the ordinances say we don't have to. The ordinances say it's granted because you didn't act when you could have. And so now you're coming to us and asking us, work with us. And we've been trying to do that since October the 19th. We don't know why we're here. We don't know why the board approved this unanimously with 3 of the members who voted sitting right here in front of me now, who are now voicing objection to the exact same thing they previously approved.
I thought that we had approved the windows back in December, and when you came back in, you said that there was a difference between you interpreting something that was different about what we'd approved versus what you thought was approved.
There was no order issued.
Pardon?
There was no order issued, therefore it was never an official action.
But there was official action, I think, to approve it.
I thought we approved the back siding with a variance and windows all the way around, I thought. And then I think understood that perhaps you took exception to that perhaps we didn't approve
Yes, sir.
what we thought we did, or what you thought.
The board voted to approve SDLs, the entire building, but never followed through with issuing an order representing that decision.
I don't understand what the significance of that. The board made the decision. Because the certificate of appropriateness wasn't signed, is that your?
It wasn't issued.
They voted in the minutes.
But there isn't an issued certificate of appropriateness.
Right, but
which is
but the action was taken. I mean, the action was the action not taken?
Nothing was signed.
But the board acted.
If it's not signed, it has not been acted upon under the ordinances.
I don't see the signing part of it. It says the board fails to take action upon an application. They took action. It's in the minutes that they took action. I don't understand the argument. So how would you say that that's not the action?
Because until it is a signed action of the board, it has no binding effect whatsoever.
So,
if it does, then why do you issue them in writing?
right, but I mean, that's like saying, if we didn't print it out and get it signed, then it's like it never happened. Is that what you're saying?
Exactly what I'm saying, because it wasn't signed off on.
I'm not an attorney, but I would say that if you have a minutes that show that an action was taken, that carries a lot of weight. I think that because of the nature of this particular application, things were still in flux, and so it was, in fact, you disputed the action that was taken. So therefore, you're recognizing that an action was taken, and so the recommendation then was, let's get this straight at the next meeting. But to say that there was no action, I'm not following that.
So what do you want to do? I'd like to go ahead and go forward with these windows as we've been talking about.
We would
at least get that.
We would ask this board to issue a certificate of appropriateness, granting our application to replace the vinyl siding and to replace the windows with the windows we brought forward for the aluminum clad windows on the front, SDLs on the front facing education wing, and the between glass grids on the rest. That's what we're asking the board to do. If the board doesn't want to do that, then we'll have to consider what options we have to enforce the provisions of the town ordinance that says it's already granted.
I think I'd at least like to move forward with getting these windows approved as we've been talking about this evening. And get that signed off on and get that moving. And then with the understanding that you still have to pull the siding off to tell where you've got bad siding before you cover anything up. I'm not expecting that to take long to do. I think the decision on what to do with the siding, whether we paint or whether there's siding put back, is going to be able to be made fairly quickly, I would think. I got the impression in what you were saying earlier that you expect that would be a lengthy process. I don't think it needs to be. I don't think it has to be. And then it gets to that point. Let's pretend it gets to the point where there is. Let's pretend there is no damage. I think there's damage. There's always damage of some kind. Let's assume there's no damage. I would think this board would come back and say, we want to see this building painted. And I think we would take action in that direction. Then I think you need to decide which way you're going to go.
Well, and like I said, we're not going to entertain that option. We're not going to take the vinyl off for you to tell us to paint it. If we're just not going to do it. And we're sitting here now, we're debating back and forth what we can do, what we can't do. If you vote for the windows and not the vinyl siding, I'm going to recommend we move forward with enforcing the town ordinances that the vinyl siding is already approved.
That'd be your prerogative. I think in light of what Mr. Williams is saying, it may not be as clear as the way you stated. I realize you're an attorney, Carol's not an attorney, but I do think there was some type of action taken. You may not have received a written document, but it's recorded in the minutes that it did occur.
And let's presume for a second that his impression is right. I don't agree with that. I think it's wrong. I've read all the ordinances. The action the board voted to take in December was to replace the windows. And it took no action on the vinyl. Therefore, if you were to make the argument that us voting to do the windows is an action, you didn't vote on anything to approve or disapprove the vinyl. So the vinyl, at the very least, is approved.
Correct me if I'm wrong, did we not grant a variance on the back building?
Or doubles for single-sided vinyl siding on the back building.
It was specified that it would be single lap siding, that's Mr. Walden's suggestion.
So that was the variance that was granted for the education building, the back building, whatever. So the only siding left to discuss or decide upon is what's on the sanctuary of the church.
And the decision was to defer to get a better understanding of what was underneath, which is also an action.
Well, there's nothing in the ordinances that say deferral is an action. It's approved, disapproved, or approved with conditions. However, what did happen then is we came in here in January, and you all voted again that everything we did in December, forget about it. We want to undo all of that. So you can't say we granted this in December, but we took it away in January, and now in February we're going to say, well, we did this in December.
I don't recall us voting to rescind the variance that we granted.
You did.
One of the early meetings.
You did. If you want, that's unquestionably you revoked everything for windows and vinyl on the entire project.
I don't recall that. Your grant with Richland County for those windows is windows installed?
Yes, sir.
What I'm trying to think of is a way to meet that deadline so the grant doesn't expire. And what I'm inclined to do is what we've discussed tonight, and I realize that's not what you want to hear, only because it doesn't address the siding. It doesn't address the side. Let me say it this way. If the board decides, we've decided that we want to keep it, we don't want to put vinyl on, or we prefer that they not put vinyl on the education building.
That's already granted, my understanding.
Well, then,
this one would end up pertaining to granting clarity and permission to place the windows of the church based on 8/8, approving the vinyl siding, and then deferring the decision to paint or to place the vinyl.
with the understanding that if in fact we paint the sanctuary, we could very well have siding on the education building and paint on the sanctuary.
That decision has already been made.
I'm with you on that. Anybody care to take a shot at a motion on that?
So I understand you guys are adverse to painting, just want to replace it with vinyl.
Yes, sir. We just want to keep it looking the same as it does
That's
now.
based on finances, right? On the
Yes, sir.
cost, on a projected cost that you,
Yes, sir.
on the data that you've received.
Yes, sir. And we're trying to compromise. We're sitting here saying, if there's square columns behind those columns, we want to take the vinyl off and paint them. If it's possible to restore some historical feature around the windows with the vinyl, we would try to do that. We're trying to make it look better than the cheap vinyl job that was done 35, 40 years ago. And
I guess beauty's in the eye of the beholder. What we're trying to do is preserve the original looks of the building. And I understand that's difficult if there's damage, blah, blah, blah. Now it looks like at least we've cut the square footage of the problem that we're talking about. We're now talking about the siding on the sanctuary.
But we haven't, because you approved something that we're not going to put on the back part. You approved 8-inch single lap siding on the back. So we're going to have two completely different profiles on the front and the back. That's what you voted for anyway in December.
Understand.
Was for single lap 8-inch siding.
I thought we approved, Ralph, the single lap siding.
That's what he's saying.
Single, okay.
It's more difficult than this one right here. So, if we take the education building, given what we voted on, I assume you would take exception to that. Signed it up, we give you an order, or whatever you want to call it, whatever kind of document that needs to be generated. I'm assuming at that point you take exception to going forward with any of that work, windows or siding?
Breaking this up into multiple phases does nothing but cost money, cost more and more money, and delay the project. And for what reason? So that we can come back next month, and we can be here again saying, we'll take the vinyl off, and we can look at it. We're going to say no. We're going around and around, and it sounds like we're both kind of at a stalemate. You want the vinyl off to look at it, and we're saying we're not going to do it. And we were trying to make accommodations to do what we can to preserve the original shutters. We're trying to preserve the original columns, trying to preserve around the windows. But we keep hearing, nope, we want it all. We want it all. We want it all. We want everything off and painted everything. And that's not a feasible option. And the church will not vote for that. The church is not going to spend money for that.
Does anybody have a motion one way or the other? Otherwise, we're just wasting each other's time.
Well, I move that we grant permission to replace the windows based on the 808 windows as presented tonight. That those windows be retrimmed like the original feature of the church, and that the vinyl siding be removed from the body of the main sanctuary for future determination as to whether or not we replace that building with vinyl or require the church to paint.
A second.
Just to interject here, I don't think the board can make a motion to make us remove vinyl siding. I don't think there's anywhere in the ordinance that says you can make us do that.
Carol, do you have any comments on that?
On the board making them remove vinyl siding, I guess it goes back to the repair or replace. You'd have to give me some time on that.
Read this.
155-055.
Say that again, Jamie.
155-055 is the non-conforming use section.
So is it, let me see.
Well, we are required to make a judgment based on the features of the church, and I don't know how we can make those judgments without seeing basically what we're dealing with.
And my issue is, the ordinances say we're allowed to replace it. They say we can replace non-conforming use as long as it's not more than 50% of the value of the building. And so you're talking about variances and everything else. We don't need a variance. The ordinances say we can replace it.
So the non-conforming structure shall not be rebuilt, altered, or repaired except in conformity with this chapter after sustaining damage or necessitating repair exceeding 50% of the replacement cost of the structure at the time of damage or wear, provided that any permitted reconstruction shall begin within 6 months or the time of damage or notice of wear, and shall be completed within 12 months after the issuance of a building permit. So, if, you know, as Mr. Walter says, you know, if it's not, I mean, if it's exceeding 50% of the replacement cost of the structure, if the repair or altering is exceeding that, then you have to bring it back to full compliance.
Or issue a variance. But if it's less than that, there's no requirement to bring it back, to bring it into current compliance.
Right.
If that education building, the back building, were, I'm going to speak out of line, but I'm going to at least put it on the table just to discuss. If that back building were allowed to have the windows replaced like you presented, but double lap siding instead of a single lap, does that at least get that back building moving?
The issue is, we're still breaking this project up and driving up costs to rent equipment again and again. And it doesn't solve the problem of the windows in the front building. I know you say, well, we can take it out and retrim it and then figure out. And nobody would ever do a project that way. Nobody would ever spend money to do something just to tear it back off in 3 months.
Do you know how they're going to perform the scope of work? And I know owners very seldom get into means and methods, but have they discussed that with you?
They'll remove all the vinyl there, remove the windows, replace the windows, then go back with new vinyl.
So they'll do that on each face of the building? No, we talked about trimming the windows out. No, I understand that. So you're going to replace windows, you're going to tear the siding off, replace all the windows, then put the siding back on? Well, I mean, the contractor. Well, we talked a minute ago, Ralph, about if we did that, if we did put the siding back, the trim would just be that much deeper coming off the face of the building. Jim, you want to restate your motion?
Move that we grant the CO for replacement of the windows, as presented tonight, the 8/8 windows. That the siding be removed from the church, but these windows be trimmed in a way that will allow either the vinyl siding to go back on the church or either painting as well. Either painting go back on the church or maybe to accept vinyl siding. Ralph, make sure that I'm stating that
think some of the details that you mentioned, which you have not said, the corner boards, things such as.
With the style boards, right.
All of that. The 8/8s are only on the sanctuary.
Right.
The other windows would match the existing window profiles.
Right.
Some of them are 6/6, not 8/8s.
But the windows maybe could be trimmed back to allow either church to be painted or to accept vinyl siding based on the condition of the body of the church.
Wouldn't you use different materials depending on vinyl or wood or painting? You wouldn't even use the same materials. So there's no way to say do it for either or because you don't use the same materials for it.
But wouldn't hardy trim work for both? Huh? Hardy trim is a fairly standard material and it is an approved material here. And it would accept, you know, from a trim standpoint, it would look the same and be equivalent.
Hardy.
Huh?
It could go either way.
But it would accept
Because
either.
whatever you do with the window trims, if you're using vinyl, you've got to have something.
Match up to.
It's either going to be wrapped or it's going to be pre-finished. And the vinyl's going to bump into it.
So with the hardy trim, it would not preclude either painting the church or having vinyl siding.
Generally I would say generally that would be a correct statement.
Explain to me
It's
how
in the
we're going to
detail.
attach hardy to this building.
Excuse me?
Explain to me what we're going to attach this hardy to. If we go hardy, we have to put up OSB back there, backing, which has to have some kind of support structure for the OSB, and then put the hardy on there, and now you're out there 2 inches.
No, I don't think so. Yeah.
Let me just interrupt. Can we get him to come speak on the mic?
I certainly understand what you're saying. Some of the unknowns, Jim, is we don't know what's behind there.
You
We
cannot
don't know what's
install,
on that existing window trim.
And can we get your name?
Ray Matthews. What I was saying is you cannot just install hardy plank trim boards, hardy plank lap siding, anything hardy plank product may not be installed over anything other than a continuous smooth backer, such as OSB or plywood. You can't just put it over top of trim boards from the 1800s that may have carvings out of it, may be corbelled moldings. You can't put it over lap siding. You can't just install those like that.
Yeah, I understand. And if you had to pull the trim boards down in order to prep to put.
Then you're messing with the structure of the window frames if you've got to pull those off, which is getting back into your historical stuff. Then you're going to start working your way into the church on the inside and messing with moldings interior.
It's all in the details. Could it be done? I think you can. Is it possibly not? It may not. It may take more work in order to get the hardy trims in place.
I mean, you're asking for an impossible thing. I mean, are you not want to maintain the hardy plank warranties? Are you asking them to go in and?
Hand up over
Can you come up?
Can you come up here?
there. I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
Can you just come up to the mic? Sorry.
Yeah, I mean, hardy plank is always used when you have an old structure where the original clapboard had been taken off and it's nothing but wall studs. And every time I've had to do a house that hardy plank was approved on, we ended up putting insulation in, covering it with plywood, and then put hardy plank on. But you can't mix it up. It just doesn't work. And hardy plank's guarantees are gone anyway, and also the contractor. It's impossible to mix it up like that and make it good.
Is there
Wanted
a
to share
trim that
that.
would work?
What's that?
Is there a trim that would work?
Is there what?
Is there a trim that you could go around the windows that would satisfy, you know, either allowing vinyl siding or?
Yeah. these windows being custom-made to the frame, or are they sized to be as close as possible, but it's a standard size that's available?
We're getting them sized as close as possible. If a custom is available in that full size, that's what it's.
Gotcha. So you are imagining a custom frame to fit in the existing
Yes.
window? Okay.
And we're looking like $4,000 or $5,000 per window. It's outrageous.
It
And so,
is.
you know, don't think we're trying to be cheap. We're not.
I know, it's
You know, and,
expensive.
you know, what I'm hearing all of you say is, we're okay with windows, replace the windows, but we're not sure what to find. So that's where we were in December, that's where we were in January. In January, you all said, you know what, we don't know. We need to bring an expert in and give us an opinion. Mr. Beatonbaugh came in here and said, "Look, you know, with preserving some historic features, I think vinyl's okay. So you bring your expert in here, he says
come
vinyl's
on.
okay, and then we're still right here again.
Do we need to change the motion any? If so, let's do it and call for the vote, because this isn't going well.
Is there a second to the motion?
I have a second.
Oh, well, we need to get that motion repeated and in the mic, because we're going to have to write that down at some point.
Okay.
Well, I mean,
Pardon?
it's as convoluted as that motion is.
I guess before we make, is there any other thoughts, Ralph, that you have about what we're trying to achieve?
Yeah.
I mean, just before we make the motion, about a way to achieve what we're, motion, how it was made. I think the biggest problem I'm having too is we don't know what's behind it. I mean, we're trying to make a decision when we don't have all the facts. I mean, that's really the kind of the crux of it.
Can I ask a question,
Yeah.
just out of the process, just to make sure that since y'all made a motion and seconded, does that motion have to be voted down before you change it, or can you alter it during this time?
I think you would withdraw the motion.
Right. Well, the motion that I made had to do with granting the CO for the replacement of the windows for the primary sanctuary with the 8/8, removing the vinyl siding so that we can see what the current condition of the church is, and then make a decision on the either painting or replacing with vinyl at that point.
Yeah, when you say removing the siding, is that all the siding in the sanctuary?
I would say so, yes. Or, I
Yeah,
guess I
portion.
back up, can we remove enough of it to make that determination for our? What do you think, Paul? Can we make,
We don't want to get us in a bind here, you know, saying only this one, we really might have to remove.
we're trying to determine what we're dealing with. We're trying to determine what the elements of the church are and whether or not it makes sense to either paint the church or to allow the church, because of hardship, to put vinyl back on the church.
If it saves you some hardship, it doesn't matter how much you say to remove. We're not doing either one, so
Sure,
put it,
I'm talking
put whatever you want to in the motion.
Just,
Well, the only thing we can do is
Just
make a
don't wanna
motion
limit
here.
it too much. second.
Any further discussion?
And this is maybe throwing the cat among the pigeons, I don't know. Jamie said that if we don't approve, they're not taking down the vinyl, and if we don't approve the vinyl, they will just repair the vinyl that is already there, which means the church will continue to have the vinyl and not have the historic look. I don't understand fully the ordinances, but it seems to me that if we're willing to accept repair of vinyl and it's okay, then but we're struggling to approve vinyl now. Does that make any sense? We don't have the authority to tell an historic building, take down your siding and redo it. We don't have that authority. So basically, they want to renew the vinyl. If we don't say yes, they will repair the vinyl, and it sits there looking tacky and tackier over the years. So it sort of leaves us in between a rock and a hard place.
We've been up against that rock all day, you're right.
I know.
Well, I guess we're asking, vinyl in itself is not an approved product today, and it is not permitted by ordinance. The only way it can go back on the church would be through a variance.
That's incorrect. It is a non-conforming use that we're continuing. It is less than 50% of the value of the building. There is no variance required. The ordinances say we can do it.
I guess I would caution, the board about making a non-conforming structure. You've got a non-conforming structure, and then you take it all off and say, oh, well, okay, now it exceeds 50%, so it can't go back. Only because, but it was only, the damage or the change, whatever the damage or wear was dictated by the board by taking off more than 50%. 50%. So
No, the question is not 50% of the vinyl. The question is whether or not the repair we're making costs more than 50% of the value of the structure.
Right.
And it does not. So in no way does this violate 155.055F, which says unless it exceeds 50%, we can.
Right. But if the board said take all that off, and the replacement cost would exceed it, or whatever needed repair at that point exceeded 50%, then you'd have to be in full compliance. But it was only because of the board saying that the applicant had to remove everything.
Well, I would ask the board what their feeling is about allowing the church to put vinyl, replace the vinyl. So that's basically the crux of our decision here tonight.
My thought is that if the vinyl is an option to repair, then consequently, and our ordinance says this decision should be made. I'm unfortunately a law and order kind of guy. So I think on behalf of the church and what Jamie's described is that they are authorized to do this. To repair. And the concern is how it's going to look once it gets repaired.
Repeat the first part and talk in the microphone. I didn't get it.
I have short-term memory. I can't repeat that. I'm just saying that they've already put us in a situation, or we've put ourselves in a situation by not acting in a way that gave them authorization that after 45 days they can automatically do it.
We're not sure about that.
What, the 45 days?
Yeah. Oh, I don't think we're clear. I think we need legal advice.
Again, I'm not an attorney, but I would say that there really wasn't much decision on the vinyl siding so much. It was on the other things, but I think that the argument you're making tonight is the same argument of you need to see what's there. But you've had plenty of time. It's been 2 months. It's been over that allotted amount of time.
And I know Peter is aware of this. He's been involved for 2 months now, I guess, at least had conversations about what's going on with this, the town attorney.
Jim, in your motion, if you stated it, I didn't hear it, I apologize. You did include, or you intended to include the siding on the back building, the education building?
Jim, can you please repeat that motion slowly so I can write it down verbatim?
I'm just trying to make sure I understand what the board's feeling is about the vinyl. I can make a motion here right now to allow for these windows, the 808, to go back in and to allow the church to be replaced with vinyl siding as it currently is. If that's the consensus of the board, then I'll make that motion.
It's not my wish.
Well, it is kind of mine.
Huh?
It is kind of my wish that in this particular case, that the vinyl, they're going to be able to do the vinyl one way, either repair it as opposed to replace it. But either way, it seems that the vinyl is going to be in play because they can repair it, like they said, as opposed to replacing it. And consequently, the vinyl is still going to go up there, except now it's not going to look, I guess, it won't match the rest of the vinyl, which is even worse. So I would say,
We're getting bullied. We're getting bullied.
Well, I'll make that motion and we'll vote on it.
I've been getting bullied, I know.
I'll make the motion that we allow for the replacement monies 808 to go into the church as presented and to allow vinyl siding to be replaced on the church as it exists.
I
Both
second it.
Sanctuary and
And is that also including the vinyl replacement windows on the education building with the between glass grids? On the back side and that side of those wings?
But both sides of the church, front and side of the church, the wings of the educational buildings, obviously will match what's on the main sanctuary.
Okay, so SDLs on the side of the education building.
Everything that's visible from the road will be 8/8.
That's not what's there now.
Some of them are not 8/8. The education wings are not 8/8.
You're right, that's correct, right.
Okay, so the SDLs,
Does that include fixing the columns and the shutters, or is that something different?
I'd like to include that.
Columns and also maybe the louvers.
Columns and louvers.
Just because due to the complexity of this, can we get this motion written out, please? If we want to capture everything in the minutes, I just need it
Right.
verbatim exactly how it's being said.
You want to write it out?
You write
I
it.
was afraid you were going to say
Write
that.
it up. I make the motion that we allow the main sanctuary for them to replace the monies with the 8/8.
and when you say 8/8, is that SDL?
That's SDL.
Okay.
And also on the front side of the Sunday school rooms. Windows on the sides of the Sunday school rooms and the back side will be GBG windows.
And Mr. McLean, just so we're all on the same page, we're all on the same page here. Let's sketch out quickly, show the SDLs on the sides, on the front wings, so between the grids on these.
On those three sides.
Vinyl over here and aluminum here.
This window, these windows, this windows, and these windows will all be identical, except for the sides, right?
These will be aluminum.
Right,
and
that's
these
right.
vinyl.
That's right.
I'm glad you clarified that. I don't think we realized that you were going to use the aluminum on the larger windows. So,
Yes.
very good.
So this is a vinyl wood and this is a clad wood. STL. But the wood is different in materials.
But looking is similar as possible.
Okay. All right.
And we'll allow vinyl siding to go back on the main sanctuary, but striving to achieve as many of the historical features of the sanctuary as possible. Mimic what's currently there, historical feature-wise.
Yes.
And we won't know that typically until everything is pulled off. And I think maybe at that point too, that maybe Chairman, you would want somebody to look at it and make sure that, we're reaching the features as close as possible.
Sure. We would also, what about the columns up front?
The columns of the church the vinyl will be stripped and painted, it's called painted.
If they're square.
They are square, based on the old photographs were.
Well, they were, but we understood they got converted round at some point.
Right.
Later in the life of the church.
That
Then they got squared up.
that the louvers on the church hopefully be painted.
Do we need to say anything about the windows behind the louvers?
Let me ask a question while we talk about it. How about
Just leave them like they
painting
are?
the front side of the church? Where the louvers are, basically the alcove, where the columns are. It is a historical feature of the church.
What are the thoughts on how that looks, mixing the vinyl and paint together in that same outfit?
It won't make any difference.
Possibility of painting the alcove in the main, as you enter the church. As you come up the church, there's an alcove where the columns are, where the louvers are in the back. Or possibly maybe just repaint the front side of the church, the front of the church.
Can you show the picture of the front of the church?
say alcove, you talk about that whole recessed area?
That's correct. You go there and paint the front of the church.
Instead of using the side.
Or on the, on the front only. Does that work or not?
Show us what you mean.
I don't know what you would be painting.
What you're saying is you're painting,
The recessed
paint
part?
this wall, this wall, this wall.
You've got the option of painting this interior or painting the entire front face of the church.
You're talking about painting the existing
The
siding.
face of the church.
Existing siding.
So here's the one, here, how about that? One consistency, two, these doors are not original at the church. They were actually larger doors at one point, and so what's behind up here, we don't know. You know, we don't know what we're gonna run into when we pull that off, what's gonna be there.
Until you pull it off, we don't know.
They originally had single swing doors on each side, not double doors.
But you have to pull that down regardless, as your first step anyway, correct? Let's assume it's gonna be sided, you would still have to pull down everything that's there.
We would.
And repair whatever's,
The only question I have is how does it meet up the vinyls with the profiles in there, can it determine out in time? Okay, what he's saying is the profile of your vinyl side, you've got flat. Now it meets up with painted, you got lap here, and they're no longer continuous, where they look.
If you paint the entire front, it wouldn't be a mismatch, so you're going corner to corner, right?
I would think at the corners,
You got corner boards at the corner.
have a trim of some kind,
You got corner boards on the corner.
fill the siding too, and then. Sorry, all your laps are what?
He's saying it's gonna look like it's a mixed match renovation, we've got boards that don't line up.
That might be a little difficult.
Okay.
Now, what I'll say is, while I'm up here saying, please don't make this part of the order, we are also, we're going to be conscientious and do what we can to preserve historical elements, if we can, even beyond what you're saying. So if we get in there and realize, okay, we can do this, there's an option to make this work, I don't think anyone on the board is going to have an issue with us doing it at that point. But we just don't know until we get a little further into it what's going to be there. So, you know, I just, give us a little bit of trust here that we're going to, if we can do it, we're going to try to, you know, preserve what we can.
Maybe what we could end up doing there is to have you and Mr. Walden, once it's pulled off, look at it and see if it makes aesthetic sense. To make sure that we don't end up with a mixed match that's not inappropriate, unattractive for the church.
Sure. You got any problem with that?
That gives it the motion.
Start the motion again.
Maybe I have to write
This
it
is the
down.
simplified one, right?
You ought to memorize it by now.
First off is the location of the window, which windows get,
I'm gonna let
which.
Ralph specify, I'm gonna say that we allow the sanctuary to be replaced with 8/8 windows, and they are SDLs,
Aluminum.
aluminum siding, right. That's on both sides of the main sanctuary. At the front of the Sunday school rooms, be allowed to go back with a vinyl window, SDL.
No, those are still
Jim, I'm sorry,
aluminum.
make sure you're talking to the mic, please. Please,
Those
sir.
are
Thank
still
you.
aluminum.
On the Sunday school room as well.
All right, can we just hold it, all right, so we're saying sanctuary,
And vinyl.
aluminum.
On the front.
We're saying vinyl.
Oh, I thought you said all
Vinyl
of those.
SDL on that front side.
Saying vinyl, that was why I was
But on the
confused.
sanctuary, it's aluminum or vinyl.
Sanctuary's aluminum.
Aluminum, the entire sanctuary gets all the same windows at aluminum STL.
That's right. But on the front of the Sunday school rooms, there will be the SELs, but there will be the vinyl window.
Okay.
That we allow the vinyl siding to go back on the main body of the church, that we will defer, make a decision on the front of the church relating to the louvers, the columns, and make sure that that everything there will work in terms of going back as close to the historical features as we can
Yes, sir.
achieve. But the front of the church may be required to be painted, and that has to do with the louvers and the columns and the face of the church itself.
Yes, sir.
All right, let me just go back to the windows real quick. All right, the sanctuary is SDL aluminum. The front of the Sunday school, which is what's facing the road,
Which
is SDL vinyl.
That's correct.
And on the back side is a GBG. Is that right?
And the education sides.
Sides of the.
Oh, okay, the back and side.
There's 3 sides on the educational building.
Okay. And you said vinyl, but are you specifying repair of the existing vinyl?
We're saying we'll allow them to replace it. I guess, Ralph, we need to decide whether or not it will be a single lap or a double lap.
I think the board needs to determine what they desire on that. We said in one of the other approvals, 7-inch single lap. I think the applicant said they're planning on doing a double lap, so I think that needs to be clarified in the notes as to what is going to be approved there.
We've been told there's not a single lap option to make that look right. I guess a long time ago they decided that was cost prohibitive to use those.
And I'd also like to ask Mr. Walden the question, are there different grades of vinyl siding?
There are.
So,
One of the questions that the board needs to understand is it a textured vinyl, meaning it looks like wood grain, or is it a flat vinyl with no texture that looks like painted siding?
do you have a recommendation yourself regarding siding in terms of the quality of the siding? Is there a gauge difference?
There are some gauge differences. I'd have to do some investigating to come up and suggest that. I don't know those right off the top of my head. My recommendation would be that you use a flat siding without texture. That's more historic looking.
Right.
Even if it's a double lap.
But is there a quality grade of the vinyl
There
siding?
are, yes. And it's based
So
on
how would we specify that?
just call it
Highest grade,
Premium vinyl,
the highest grade quality, or
highest grade vinyl available?
Yeah, because, I mean, it varies based on the thickness of the vinyl and
Right.
their manufacturer, so we would expect that it'd be a premium grade vinyl.
A premium grade, okay. And I assume the color would end up being white?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so as white as it is.
But I think you need to determine, is the board accepting the double lap, which the applicant said, based on the exposure dimension, the double lap or the single lap? I think that needs to be clear.
Current lap's what, 5, 6 inches, 7 inches? What do you think?
4 to 5.
What's that?
4 to 5.
That existing double lap is probably about a 5-inch, isn't it? You think it's about a 5-inch?
And the wood behind it is a 4 to 5 inch clapboard.
I think the double lap we find, as long as it met, the close to the original lap of the church as possible. The only other thing that I'm not sure how we put into this motion is how we judge the replacement of the historical features around the church when we're going back with the trim. So I need some help with that. You got historical features that are going to be exposed once the current aluminum siding, aluminum trim is pulled off, and the vinyl. So how do we write in trying to mimic those requirements?
Well, it's corner boards. That's number one, is every place it's contemporary look. Quite often is that you bring the laps to the corner, and then you've got a piece of trim that's got the lap on it,
Right.
versus physical corner boards at each corner, where everything dies into that corner board. So depending on how you perceived historical look. Most of those probably had corner boards.
What we're trying to do is duplicate what's on the church. I mean, that's
And
that's
corner,
in the
corner
order.
boards are there now.
Their corner boards are there?
They are, yes, sir.
Yeah, so we would just say, corner boards on the corners, the flat trim around the windows would be similar to what is currently exposed. Those are about 4 inches, something such as that.
Right. And I would also put in the motion too that, that when they get one of the windows trimmed, that you and Mr. Muscati give approval on that,
Yeah, that would be great. We could go down.
on that, those features.
What about the panel between the windows vertically?
Between the top and bottom floor. So the historical picture shows us a flat board back there. I know right now there's this kind of four-edged pyramid almost shape between the two of them.
Kurt, can you flip to the side of the building one more time that shows those windows? Current, okay, that's the existing. How about the new?
No, that's the original.
That's the original, yeah, I'm sorry, I said exist, but I didn't. Yeah, can you flip to the new?
Is that the picture you're asking for?
No, side, the side.
The one with
I think you have to go back to the photos, do you have the application?
How about the cornice? Church cornice work.
Cornice work?
That's
there.
it. That's it.
That's the current. And I might be mistaken, but it appears to me that dimension and the head and the sill are wider than the original. That's just my perception. When I look at that original, it looks like it's got a board. This looks like it's just got a bit more depth. So that could, you could run the trims continuous and do a flat, what I believe actually an applicant said there'd be a flat piece in the center there, so that that sort of pops out, let the trims run continuous, trim top and bottom, and that may be a flat piece there.
You run the style board at the top where the two meet? You run the style board at the top where the cornice meets the siding or not? Vinyl or not?
Oh, you're talking about corners.
Yeah.
I haven't looked carefully at there, but I would assume that in a traditional design, you've got a fascia, you've got a soffit, you've got a frieze board, and you've got siding. That's sort of typical. Is that what you think might be under all of that stuff up there? Are we gonna touch the soffit work and the fascia? Is that?
In the eaves?
Yeah, the eaves, what we call it.
No, we don't intend to mess that at all.
You don't intend to mess with that?
Y'all have that?
No.
Is there kind of a way to summarize the things that you need, that you're in the order that you're saying that Paul and Ralph will go inspect and kind of list, I know you said something about the trim with the windows and then the louvers and the columns.
That's correct. When all the trim, when the current trim is pulled off the windows, that Paul and Ralph will expect it. They'll probably have that replaced with the original feature of the church.
Okay, but also you want them to inspect the louvers and the columns, is that correct?
Absolutely.
Okay, so
both
those
the
three
front-
things, so,
Both the front of the church and the sides of the church, the historical features around the windows.
right. And then how about the corner board and that, does that need inspection or is it just in general retain historic features of the church?
I'm not sure
So you said something about the corner board,
Yes.
I'm not,
You could just say the miscellaneous trims.
right.
We want to match the existing historic trim.
And is that part of what y'all will be inspecting?
Yeah, once they get it uncovered and we maybe have got a window set,
Okay.
and trim the window out, we'll get a call from the contractor, whoever that is, we'll go take a look at it.
Okay, so,
And I would like to call both of you, Mr. Scotty, Mr. Walden, both, when we start tearing stuff off, come look at it before we even start doing anything. Let's see what's there. We can all kind of figure out a game plan together to how to make this work.
Perfect, we'd be happy to do that.
okay, so just to summarize, make sure you got the sanctuary is SDL aluminum, the front of the Sunday school is SDL vinyl. The back and the size of the Sunday school is GBG vinyl. Replace the vinyl siding on the sanctuary and the Sunday school with premium grade white double lap siding.
Right.
Okay. And the trim and louvers and columns and other historic features will be left to the determination of
Replicating of the current historic, the replicating of the historic features that are now in the church.
Okay.
Around the windows, but I would say replicating of the current historic features.
So the replicating of historic features be left to the
To the chairman and.
to the chairman and Ralph for the for observation or determination, final determination. Okay.
And then that pertains to, say, to the columns, also the
Yeah, and I'll
vents, all that needs to be in there.
vents. I'm just going to say and other miscellaneous.
Right.
Okay.
Mr. Walters, understand the motion?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Do you want me to read that again? Yeah. I mean, because we're going to put this in writing, so I want to make sure that we don't have to get another review. But I think we got the windows right, and then replacing the vinyl is the second one, and then the third is the replication of historic features. Will be left to the final determination of the board chair and Mr. Walden.
I would say that there are to replicate the features approved by.
As approved, yeah. So replicate, okay.
But the historic features have to be replicated.
As approved. Okay. Yeah, no, yeah, I missed that one. Is it, did you want the flush siding or the textured siding?
Smooth.
Okay.
And I'd also, like just note in this that we're approving the siding without samples, which are,
We should see samples.
should see samples for the approved.
Before it's started installed.
Okay.
Maybe they can be brought back to the board, this board for approval. Actual samples before they start.
Well, how about could they make the determination?
That'd be fine.
Okay, with the board chair.
Not restoring a historical feature if it's going to void any warranties with the siding. Just keep that in mind as we make determination. We want to do everything we can, but we don't want to void warranties either.
I think if it's something that is,
We can address that with Paul.
yeah, and
Right.
if it's something that significant, then it needs to come back to the board then,
Sure.
but, okay.
But y'all gonna have to present samples prior to applying.
To
To,
Mr. Scott.
right, yeah.
Yes, sir. Yeah, we previously brought vinyl in here at a prior meeting.
But this is a premium sample.
Yeah, I mean, this is specific.
Not me.
Oh, I second it.
Any discussion? Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those against?
No.
Ayes have it.
Need a motion to adjourn?
We got another case. No,
Shit, not today.
I
Can I
make
get
a
a second?
motion that we adjourn.
Second that.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
You hold the longest meetings.
It's